Chapter 3389. Granny, how did these monsters become spirits? They are even more cunning than the human race. Xiao Hua secretly cursed in his heart. The monster was so direct that his wishful steel rod did not completely fall down. The weight of the wishful steel rod was much lighter than when it fell down. The monster's action was to seize a slight opportunity. With a muffled sound, the wishful steel staff hit the back of the monster, which was also sent by the monster. Xiao Hua's arms trembled, and then he saw the monster's oily body flash. His wishful steel staff once again slipped from the monster's skin. Moreover, Xiao Hua could clearly see that when the wishful steel staff slipped, the muscles under the monster's oily skin were trembling rapidly. It was not so much fear, but more like it was unloading the force. "Immortal friend." The strong man's very majestic voice came. This beast is called Penetrating Void. Not only can it walk freely in the void, but the surface of its body is also covered with a strange oil. This oil is slippery and is what this beast relies on to walk in the void. If it were not for the weapon that can tear the void, I am afraid it would not be easy to deal with. "Granny, I'll let you hide, I'll let you hide." Xiao Hua listened to the strong man's reminder and then looked at the strong man who was fighting with the strange insect. He was far less embarrassed than himself. The Vajra Dharmakaya of the size of 5 feet madly swung the wishful steel staff in the air, displaying the Tong Tian staff technique. The staff was faster than the previous one, and the staff chased after the monster to hit it. At first, the monster was still able to resist. Like a lump of oily dough, it allowed Xiao Hua to beat it. But after a long time, Xiao Hua's strength did not seem to be exhausted. At first, the monster was obviously unable to endure. Seeing Xiao Hua's staff strike again, the monster dodged and disappeared. Pooh! The sound was much louder than before. Immediately after, the monster let out a miserable cry and looked towards the direction of the strange insect. Roar! At the same time, the strange insect was afraid of the strong man's weapon. It hid in the void several times to sneak attack the strong man, but it was hit by the strong man's 3-pointed double-edged sword. It was a little anxious. Now that it heard the monster's screams, it became even more furious. With a loud roar, its 2 hind legs crossed in the air at the same time, like 2 long swords slashing at the strong man's body. A mere bug dares to be arrogant in front of this true lord. The burly man laughed and waved the 3-pointed, double-edged sword in the air. Then he stretched out his left hand. Buzz! The entire space vibrated and countless clouds appeared out of thin air. Then, the burly man clenched his left hand into a fist and punched at the 2 hind legs of the strange insect. Following the burly man's fist, the countless clouds that had just appeared turned into thousands of noble chi, sweeping up hurricanes, forming a vast chi pillar that attacked the strange insect from all directions. Shit! Xiao Hua was shocked again. He couldn't be bothered to kill the monster and hurriedly sent a voice transmission. "Fellow Immortal, be careful. This bug can devour the essence energy of heaven and earth." The brawny man was shocked and hurriedly tried to withdraw his fist, but how could he stop now? Rumble. Hundreds of chi pillars comparable to Xiao Hua's thunder-attracting technique descended from the sky and blasted towards the strange insect. The body of the strange insect rolled continuously under this intense bombardment. Seeing the strange insect like this, the brawny man coldly snorted, looking rather obstinate and self-opinionated. However, after a moment, although the strange insect was still rolling within the chi pillars and looked extremely distressed, its originally 2 feet long shell actually slowly expanded until it was 4 or 5 feet long. Xiao Hua's mouth was somewhat bitter. This strange insect was really cunning. When it was fighting with the brawny man, it didn't reveal the slightest ability to devour the essence energy of heaven and earth. It had been hiding until now. The brawny man's move was indeed powerful, but it had also fed the strange insect until it was full. Humans are still inferior to insects. When did the world become so strange? Xiao Hua sighed and thought with emotion. If this Xiao didn't have some misgivings about this Confucian cultivator, I'm afraid I would have already told him about the abilities of this strange insect. Why would I have let this Confucian cultivator enter the trap? And if this Confucian cultivator had told this Xiao everything about this strange insect, I'm afraid this Xiao wouldn't have to waste so much effort, right? Fellow Immortal. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua hurriedly sent a sound transmission. Don't worry, first stall this insect. Wait until I kill this beast, then we'll work together to kill this insect. The brawny man looked up and down at Xiao Hua's Dharma body, which was even larger than his own, and a trace of a sneer appeared on his face. Why don't you deal with this insect and let me kill this monster? It seems like this strange insect was originally chasing you to kill you, right? Fellow Immortal. Xiao Hua didn't hide anything and hurriedly explained, my methods mostly use the essence energy of heaven and earth. The weapon in my hand can't cause the strange insect to have any misgivings, so I can't stall this strange insect as easily as Fellow Immortal. This monster should be Fellow Immortal's target, right? Fellow Immortal can rest assured, even if I kill this beast, it will belong to Fellow Immortal. I don't want a single strand of hair. Xiao Hua said very sincerely, but the brawny man was still somewhat hesitant. When did your Buddhist sect use the essence energy of heaven and earth? Xiao Hua suddenly understood. He touched his bald head and said with a smile, I am Tao sect's Xiao Hua, not a Buddhist sect's disciple. It's just that I encountered danger in the void passage, so the hair on my head no longer exists. Tao sect? The brawny man was slightly stunned. Soon after, a trace of understanding appeared in his eyes. He nodded and said, so what you used just now was Tao sect's lightning attracting technique? Be careful. At this moment, the strange insect had already stopped rolling in the righteous qi. Its body, which was close to 10 feet long, streaked across the sky like a gray shadow and once again flew towards the brawny man. I am Confucian cultivator Sun Jian. That brawny man already knew how powerful the strange insect was. How could he still dare to be negligent? His two hands brandished the three-pointed, double-edged blade, blocking the strange insect. He also hurriedly said, not only does the penetrating void beast's skin and flesh have a rare toughness that is hard to break, its eyes even have the penetrating void eye, which can break open the void. If the penetrating void beast attacks with this, it will be even more powerful. If not for the penetrating void divine weapon, any defense would be unable to withstand a single blow. Fortunately, this beast has already used the penetrating void eye just now. It will need some time before it can use it again. You can try your best to find a way to kill this beast during this time. Although the brawny man spoke somewhat vaguely, Xiao Hua had already understood that this Confucian cultivator Sun Jian had indeed utterly defeated the penetrating void beast by relying on the three-pointed, double-edged blade in his hand. He didn't have such a divine weapon, so he probably had to think of another way. If it was a method to kill this beast, the first thing Xiao Hua thought of was the soul execution origin light. That strange insect was very peculiar. It seemed to have no soul and was unable to have its mind pinned down by the soul execution origin light. This penetrating void beast might not be the same. As long as it was pinned down by the soul execution origin light, even if the penetrating void beast's skin and flesh were strange, it would probably still be killed by the soul execution origin light. But the problem was that the soul execution origin light was Xiao Hua's killer. Xiao Hua didn't want to reveal it to outsiders. Moreover, the soul execution origin light's sharpness seemed to be insufficient to break open the void. Xiao Hua also didn't have the confidence to truly kill the penetrating void beast. Thinking of sharpness, Xiao Hua naturally thought of the sword light in his middle dantian. The 9 flying swords transformed from sword qi should be the sharpest weapon in Xiao Hua's hands right now. But obviously, these 9 swords weren't divine weapons. Even if they were used, they wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. Moreover, his Confucian cultivator's cultivation was really too shallow. There was no need to make a fool of himself in front of this 5th-level essence energy great grandmaster. Forget it. Xiao Hua's mind spun a few thoughts. The wishful staff in his hand once again made that beast stagger a few times. Xiao Hua made a decision. Or should I use the sword gourd? Let's kill this beast first. Thinking of this, Xiao Hua flung his hand and used the Yuanning's hand. He prepared to seal the penetrating void beast's surroundings in preparation for the sword gourd. Who would have thought that just as the Yuanying's hand was used, the penetrating void beast's body immediately flashed with a faint gray brilliance. A kind of slippery feeling transmitted from the Yuanying's hand. The space around the penetrating void beast seemed to have been sealed. But in this space, the penetrating void beast was still twisting like a loach. So much so that the top of the penetrating void beast's head flashed with a black and white light. An inch-long sharp spike suddenly emerged. An ice-cold feeling that was even more painful than the sharp spike transmitted from Xiaohua's Naiwen palace. Powerful, Xiaohua sensed that the innate divine restriction outside his Naiwen palace was suffused with a golden light. He knew that this penetrating void beast actually had an attack similar to a soul spike. He couldn't help but look at this penetrating void beast in a new light. Previously, when he saw this monster being chased into a sorry state by Sun Jian, and when he didn't see how powerful it was after fighting with it for so long, he had already felt contempt for it. Now, it seemed that a monster that could break through the void was definitely not as simple as he thought. Although this spike only hit the Yuanying's hand, it could still pierce into the Naiwen palace through the Yuanying's divine sense. It was not inferior to his own soul spike. If it was an ordinary cultivator, they would have been injured. It would be normal even if they died. It is impolite to come and go. Xiaohua sneered and immediately used the soul spike technique. This soul spike technique was originally very powerful with the help of the sun-shrouding art. Now that Xiaohua had just advanced to the Yuanying realm, although his realm was not stable, the pressure and divine sense of the Yuanying realm had risen. When he used it, even gods and ghosts would be unable to escape. The spike that had just grown out of the penetrating void beast flashed with a strong black and white light and rapidly shrank. Its small head shook like a rattle drum. The unstable space within a few dozen feet of the penetrating void beast also shook violently. Layers of ripples gradually formed in the void. Buzz buzz. Just when Xiaohua was confident in his victory and pondered about what method he should use to kill this void-penetrating beast, there was a sound that sounded like a group of mountains flapping their wings. Not only did the spatial fluctuation caused by the void-penetrating beast stop spreading in all directions, it instead suddenly contracted. In a few breaths, it seeped into the void-penetrating beast's body like flowing water. At the same time, the sharp spike that had just retracted suddenly extended out from the top of the void-penetrating beast's head, and an extremely brilliant black and white brilliance shot towards Xiaohua's heart. Be careful, fellow immortal. This is the penetrating void eye. Sun Jian actually still had energy left and hurriedly warned. Chapter 3390. The black and white brilliance known as the penetrating void eye was really fast. By the time Xiaohua noticed it, it had already hit Xiaohua's heart. Seeing that it was about to touch the clothes that Xiaohua had taken out in a hurry, Xiaohua was shocked. He hurriedly used the ethereal steps and the wind escape technique. An afterimage appeared in place, and Xiaohua's figure barely dodged to the side. The black and white brilliance passed through Xiaohua's afterimage and went straight into the void. Ah! Cold sweat broke out on Xiaohua's head. He was secretly lucky to escape the attack. But immediately after, a sharp pain unexpectedly came from Xiaohua's heart. Xiaohua was greatly alarmed and involuntarily cried out, How is this possible? I have clearly dodged it. Fly 10 feet higher. Sun Jian's stern reminder sounded in Xiaohua's ears like a gong. Xiaohua did not hesitate and flew into the sky. He flew not only 10 feet, but more than 50 feet. Just as he steadied himself in the air, a black and white beam of light as thick as a bowl shot out from the void behind his back. Xiaohua hurriedly accelerated the operation of the blood drop paradise in his body to eliminate the danger of the penetrating void beast's attack. On the one hand, he was ready to take out the sword gourd. The defense of this void-penetrating beast was impeccable. His wishful steel staff could only injure it, but it was difficult to kill it in one blow. The attack of the void-penetrating beast was so strange. Not only could it attack the entity through the virtual shadow, but it could also turn back through the void. If he fought for a long time, although he might not die, he would definitely suffer. He had just formed his nascent soul and his realm was not stable. If he was injured, it would definitely have a great impact on his Dao foundation. Thinking about it, Xiaohua waved his hand and the sword gourd was about to attack. However, at this moment, something that shocked Xiaohua happened once again. The void-penetrating beast was even more nimble than a swimming fish as it soared into the sky. The black and white brilliance that was as thick as the mouth of a bowl accurately struck between its eyes. Pop! There was the sound of a bubble bursting. Although this sound was very soft, it caused the entire space to tremble slightly. After that, an eye the size of a bowl suddenly opened between the void-penetrating beast's eyes as the black and white light hit it. His eyes were a mixture of grayish-white colors. Pieces of white were like white clouds floating in the grayish-white sky. Every piece of white cloud seemed to be the most precious thing in the world. Xiaohua's gaze was instantly attracted. Xiaohua's eyes were completely grayish-white. Hey, be careful, fellow Taoist. This is the second attack of the void-piercing eye. Just as Xiaohua's gaze fell on the third eye of the void-penetrating beast, the soul cultivator Xiaohua's sigh was like a sudden clap of thunder that woke Xiaohua up. Void-penetrating eye? Void-penetrating beast. Xiaohua came back to his senses at once as he suddenly realized something. The moment Xiaohua turned his eyes, a silver-white brilliance shot out even more rapidly than the black-white brilliance. Even the space between Xiaohua and the void-penetrating beast started to tremble intensely because of this silver-white brilliance. Dharma eye? Xiaohua wasn't familiar with the black-white brilliance, but Xiaohua was extremely familiar with this silver-white brilliance. Wasn't it just an ordinary delusion breaker Dharma eye and Goldie's third eye's silver light? Of course, the void-penetrating beast's silver light was clearly much more powerful than Xiaohua's delusion breaker Dharma eye's silver light. Even if Xiaohua had the time to open his Dharma eye, he might not necessarily be able to compete with the void-penetrating beast in terms of the power of the silver-white brilliance. Moreover, at this moment, that silver-white brilliance had already enveloped Xiaohua. Even if Xiaohua used the wind escape technique to dodge, it was unlikely that he would be able to escape unscathed. However, at such a critical moment, Xiaohua was so calm that it was frightening. That deathly white face of his actually revealed a trace of a smile. He was simply more confident than someone who had a card up his sleeve. Xiaohua didn't use any divine ability. He merely stretched out his left hand and held it flat in front of his chest. That silver-white brilliance that shook the space within a range of several zhang obediently fell into Xiaohua's left palm like a chick returning to its nest. Seeing that the brilliance that filled the sky was annihilated by Xiaohua's palm, Sun Jian's eyeballs almost fell out of their sockets. What's more, when that silver-white brilliance fell into Xiaohua's palm, that void-penetrating beast seemed to have lost its essence. It softly collapsed in midair, unexpectedly without any power to resist. Immortal. Fellow Immortal. Sun Jian was flabbergasted. He didn't have time to think about what kind of divine ability Xiaohua had used. He suddenly came to a realization. A kind of ecstasy rushed into his heart and he shouted, "Quick! You quickly come and replace me." Xiaohua understood that Sun Jian wanted him to deal with the strange insect while he came to kill the void-penetrating beast. But Xiaohua agreed almost without hesitation. He waved the wishful staff in his hand and was about to fly over. However, before Sun Jian and Xiaohua could exchange places, that strange insect let out a strange AO. And its entire body swelled up again. With a kick of its hind legs, it actually wanted to rush to the void-penetrating beast in front of Sun Jian to save it. It's too late. Sun Jian instantly weighed the pros and cons and said anxiously, "Fellow Immortal, take this beast first." But Xiaohua frowned. Seeing that the strange insect was about to teleport away, he hurriedly swept the void-penetrating beast with his mind. The behemoth of several zhang in size instantly fell into his space. Seeing that Xiaohua was so decisive and took the void-penetrating beast so nimbly, Sun Jian couldn't help but have a trace of doubt in his heart. After all, this void-penetrating beast was his main purpose in entering the space node this time, and he had spent a lot of energy to enter this time. Now that the strange beast was defeated by him, but it was taken by a cultivator he didn't know. Moreover, it was a Taoist cultivator. Whether he could get it back and what price he had to pay to get it back had become a big problem. However, just as he had doubts, the strange insect finally showed its power. The strange insect's body suddenly spewed out a gray mist. This gray mist was extremely viscous. As soon as it fell into the void, part of it evaporated and disappeared, while the other part covered the strange insect's body. Fellow Immortal, this strange insect. Sun Jian had a bad feeling in his heart. He hurriedly looked at Xiaohua, expecting Xiaohua to give a definite answer. Unfortunately, Xiaohua had never seen the strange insect act like this. He was also shocked. He waved the wishful staff in his hand and shouted, "Fellow Immortal son, this is the first time I have encountered this strange insect. I don't know its origin. Now you and I have to work together without any gaps. This void-penetrating beast is useless to this little one. As long as this strange insect... No, as long as you and I can escape with our lives, this little one can immediately give the void-penetrating beast to you." Escape? When Sun Jian heard this, his face unconsciously showed arrogance. He waved the three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand and said coldly, "How can I escape when dealing with an insect? Although we are inside the space node, if others know about it, where will my face go? You don't have to say more, we will work together to kill this strange insect." Space node? Xiaohua was slightly stunned, and then he understood that this spatial node was probably another name for spatial veins. However, he still felt disdain towards Sun Jian's pride and face. "You're about to lose your life, so what face is there to talk about?" Unfortunately, Xiaohua looked around and saw that the previous passage had been closed. Although the space was large, with his understanding of the strange insect, he was afraid that he would not be able to escape the pursuit of the strange insect. He could only fight the enemy together with Sun Jian. Xiaohua had just flown to the other side of the strange insect when a sharp sound of wind filled the entire space. Behind the gray fog, the strange insect's body had doubled in size. It was already close to 3 zhang tall. Moreover, there were crescent-shaped grooves all over the strange insect's body. The sharp and ear-piercing sound of wind came from those grooves. Along with the sound of the wind, waves of heaven and earth yuan qi fell into the grooves. The strange insect's body gradually expanded again. As time passed, the suction force in the groove became stronger and stronger. Not only did the entire space shake, even Xiaohua and Sun Wu's Dharmakayas, which were dozens of feet in size, could not stand still. Furthermore, an extremely unfamiliar aura, which was similar to pressure or primordial thought, was being emitted from the strange insect. Xiaohua could feel his own divine thought, and even the Buddha's Saraira could not help but jump out of his Naiwan palace and pounce towards that aura. Oh no, Xiaohua had never encountered such a strange attack. The innate divine restriction in his Naiwan palace flashed with golden light and protected the Buddha's Saraira with his divine sense. Looking at Sun Jian, there was also shock on his face. Golden light flashed around his body. Obviously, he was also resisting. Moo! The strange insect spread its wings and let out a moo like a cow. It was unknown whether the sound came from the mouth of the strange insect or from its wings. Similarly, 2 faintly discernible phantoms flew out from the strange insect's wings and pounced toward Xiaohua and Sun Jian at the same time. Not waiting for the illusory figure to get close, a burst of indescribable coldness appeared around Xiaohua. Wisps of ice were actually formed in the air, and layers of white frost instantly appeared on Xiaohua's bald head. That coldness seemed to be able to freeze his bones. Xiaohua, who had not known the cold for a long time, could not help but shiver. Looking at the strange insect's malevolent shadow pouncing towards him, Xiaohua suddenly smiled coldly. That smile was even colder than the strange insect's shadow. This was because between Xiaohua's eyebrows, a dark green light flashed. The 2 small characters, thunder and lightning, appeared out of thin air. Then, a wave of lightning enveloped the space between Xiaohua and the strange insect. With a kacha sound, it landed on the strange insect's shadow. Moo! The strange insect's shadow was obviously caught unprepared. Even Xiaohua's attack was beyond its expectations. With just a layer of lightning, more than half of the strange insect's shadow was eliminated. The strange insect's shadow no longer dared to move forward. For the first time, It panicked and fled in front of Xiaohua. However, just as the strange insect retreated, Xiaohua's second wave of lightning ruthlessly poured down. The originally incomplete shadow was instantly destroyed by Xiaohua. Seeing that his attack had succeeded, Xiaohua was immediately filled with courage. Previously, this strange insect was like a thorny hedgehog. Xiaohua wanted to eat it, but he did not dare to open his mouth. Now that he finally had a breakthrough, it seemed that the soul cultivation technique was also effective against this strange insect. His lightning and thunder technique was enough to kill this strange insect. Chapter 3391. Looking at Sun Jian in the distance, he was somewhat different from Xiaohua. Seeing the shadow of the strange insect pouncing over, he suddenly slashed with the three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand, directly chopping at the shadow. What was really surprising was that the shadow actually split into two pieces at the tip of the three-pointed, double-edged sword. However, at the corner of Sun Jian's mouth, before that sneer could appear, the two pieces of the shadow turned into two different shadows and continued to pounce on Sun Jian's body without slowing down. Sun Jian sneered again, not dodging at all. Golden light flowed around his body like a golden mountain. When the shadow pounced on the golden light, it let out a sizzling sound, and in a moment, more than half of it melted away. Oh! The strange insect finally let out a roar, and the shadow turned into a wind. Without waiting for Sun Jian to attack further, it rushed into the strange insect's body, and the suction force of the crescent moon-like groove increased again. Since you're so greedy, I'll let you eat to your heart's content. Sun Jian seemed to have thought of something, and with a raise of his hand, the noble qi turned into a pillar of qi and bombarded the strange insect. The huge roar even made Xiaohua look askance. He really didn't expect that the punches and kicks of Confucian cultivators could reach such a level. Sun Jian! Xiaohua suddenly woke up. The Confucian military school seems to have been founded by Sun Wu, Old Master Sun, right? According to Fu Jiwen, the Confucian scholars can command the wind and clouds, and the martial artists of the military school can also throw the wind and clouds into chaos with their punches and kicks. This Sun Jian might be a descendant of the military school. Seeing the huge wave of air rushing into the strange insect's body, the strange insect swelled up like a balloon. Its body grew bigger and bigger, and its saw-like tentacles and bloody mouth exuded a strange bloodthirsty aura. In particular, as the strange insect's body grew bigger, its terrifying aura also rapidly increased. According to Xiaohua's estimation, in the time it took to eat a meal, this aura would definitely surpass his own pressure. Fellow immortal Xiao! Sun Jian urged the noble qi to pour into the strange insect's body, and said, "This insect is extremely powerful, and its defense is even stronger than the void-penetrating beast. Although my weapon can injure this insect, it can't completely kill it. Furthermore, I've already thought about it for a long time, and I don't think any of my abilities can completely restrain this insect. From what I can see, this insect is able to pass through the void like the void-penetrating beast, and it even has the ability to teleport. Even if we try to escape, I'm afraid we won't be able to. The only thing we can do now is to fight it to the death." "That's exactly what I was thinking." Xiaohua smiled bitterly. However, it seems that fellow immortal Sun wants to use his noble qi to make the strange insect explode, right? This road doesn't seem to be accessible. It's impossible for the noble spirit to make the insect explode, but if the noble spirit were to explode inside the insect's body, would I be able to help it from the outside? Sun Jian seemed to have a bamboo shoot in his chest. He said with a smile, but the smile on his bronze face looked a little strange. "I understand." Xiaohua nodded slightly. He didn't know what method Sun Jian had to make the massive amount of righteous qi explode in the strange insect's body, but Sun Jian's idea was indeed the only way. Xiaohua thought for a moment and reminded, "What if I also gather some heaven-earth yuan qi for it?" "Do as you wish." Sun Jian smiled faintly. "Perhaps it's better than nothing?" "All right," Xiaohua also smiled. He rubbed his hands together, and countless rays of light appeared in his palms. When Xiaohua waved his hands, bursts of heavenly thunder poured into the space like a torrential downpour. They were even denser than hail as they smashed into the strange insect. Oh! Sun Jian raised his eyebrows. He was clearly a little surprised. Although Xiaohua's lightning thunder technique was strange, its power and momentum were really small, so Sun Jian didn't pay attention to it at all. However, this lightning attraction technique actually shook the entire space. It was no wonder Sun Jian had a whole new level of respect for it. However, Sun Jian clearly had some foundation. He only raised his eyebrows, and the surprise only lasted for a moment before he focused on urging the noble spirit. In fact, it wasn't just Sun Jian who was surprised. Even Xiaohua himself was greatly surprised. Before he reached nascent soul, Xiaohua still had to form hand seals, and the male and female lightning beast cores in his body also had to respond. Now, he didn't need to form any seals at all. It was as if the lightning in the sky was his and he could take it down with a wave of his hand. Could it be that my nascent soul stage is different? The male and female lightning beast's cores have already fused with my nascent soul? My nascent soul is already able to completely sense lightning? Xiaohua secretly pondered. He knew that a cultivator's nascent soul could directly communicate with the world and use the origin energy of the world. However, there was a limit to this communication. It also had to rely on the cultivation of the nascent soul to gradually obtain it. How could it be like him, who had just reached the nascent soul stage and could freely control lightning? At this moment, he looked at his dantian and saw that the tiny nascent soul that was exactly the same as him was no longer fearful. It gritted its teeth and waved its tiny hands and feet like him, wishing it could pull down the thunderclouds from the 9 heavens and smash the strange insect that had scared him to death in an instant. Oh! Feeling the nascent soul's anger and hatred, Xiaohua suddenly understood. After a nascent soul cultivator reached the nascent soul stage, they would only have one nascent soul. After releasing the nascent soul would be placed in the nascent soul. Their own physical body would be in an awkward state where no one could control it. Of course, there were also some cultivators who had secret techniques that allowed them to control their physical body for a short period of time. It was just like when Taoist Jingxi was chasing him. Taoist Jingxi controlled her nascent soul to use a teleportation technique to attack him while also controlling her physical body to fly in the air. Other people didn't have a second nascent soul, but Xiaohua himself had one. Not to mention a second nascent soul, even a third nascent soul, a fourth nascent soul, even a 10th nascent soul had one. Thinking about how the green-robed Xiaohua was muttering that he didn't have a suitable body to leave the space, this nascent soul, wasn't it tailor-made for these nascent souls? If it was possible, wouldn't Xiaohua's several nascent souls be able to use this nascent soul as a body and come out every day to be free and unfettered for a while? Thinking of this, Xiaohua actually beamed with joy. Fellow Taoist Xiao, put in more effort. At this moment, although Sun Jian didn't know why Xiaohua suddenly laughed, his heart was as calm as Xiaohua's. He didn't forget to remind him as he looked at the strange insect that was expanding like a balloon. Hearing this, Xiaohua said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist son, rest assured. This Xiao doesn't have any other magical abilities, but this lightning-attracting technique can fill me up. Let's see how this Xiao will raise this strange insect." As he said this, another wave of lightning easily descended. Good. Sun Jian was overjoyed. He punched out, and the same dozens of qi pillars shot towards the strange insect. Countless waves of qi rolled around the strange insect's body, and countless lightning crackled. Bursts of gray light flickered, as if it was about to lose control of the light. Therefore, Sun Jian touched his chest and transmitted his voice. "Fellow Taoist Xiao, looking at the strange insect's situation, I'm afraid it's about time. This one will trigger the righteous qi inside the strange insect's body. If your excellency has any method to detonate the lightning, that would be the best." Xiaohua smiled bitterly. He understood in his heart that the current him might be able to detonate the lightning, but the lightning that was still absorbed by the strange insect's body was probably no longer lightning. How could he still control it? If there are still some fire talismans in the space, I can give it a try. Thinking of this, Xiaohua's heart suddenly moved. He opened his mouth and spat out a wisp of spiritual fire. Along with Xiaohua's divine fire art, the The spiritual fire rushed into the void like a lively little bird and followed the lightning towards the strange insect. Xiaohua was most likely the most familiar with this kind of sneaky person who hid the spiritual fire. However, just as Xiaohua released the spiritual fire, a misty green light flashed in front of his eyes. It was precisely from Sun Jian's hand. Kunlun mirror? Xiaohua looked at the familiar light, and shock appeared in his eyes. He almost blurted out, "That's right, Sun Jian's hand was holding a treasured mirror." It was the Kunlun mirror that Xiaohua was familiar with. It was almost the same as the icy mirror in Xiaohua's space. How could there be another Kunlun mirror? Xiaohua's heart was somewhat crazy. His own icy mirror was still incomplete. He didn't expect that a complete Kunlun mirror had already appeared in this unfamiliar hidden immortal continent. He saw Sun Jian holding the Kunlun mirror in his hand, and his hand formed a seemingly right but actually wrong seal. Several streams of righteous qi rushed into the Kunlun mirror, and the Kunlun mirror was suffused with a faint clear light. Then, that clear light, under Sun Jian's control, turned into a beam of light and rushed towards the strange insect. The beam of light was very strange. After rushing out of the Kunlun mirror for more than half a foot, it immediately disappeared. Looking at Sun Jian again, he threw the Kunlun mirror in his hand into the air, and raised the three-pointed double-edged sword in his hand high into the sky. A burst of kakakabing sounds came from his body, and the size of his Dharma body increased by more than 10 feet. Moreover, the golden light around his body became even brighter. Kill! Sun Jian stepped on the auspicious cloud and rushed towards the strange insect with the three-pointed double-edged sword. Buzz! The strange insect flapped its wings, and countless light shadows rushed out of the strange insect's body, wanting to block Sun Jian. However, those light shadows turned into fireflies under the three-pointed double-edged sword. Ayo! The strange insect roared and flew towards the three-pointed double-edged sword. One of its hind legs drew a line in the air, blocking the three-pointed double-edged sword. Unexpectedly, it made a golden sound. Sun Jian seemed to be defeated. His figure staggered, and the strange insect's sawtooth mouth took advantage of the situation to bite one of Sun Jian's arms. Not good. Xiaohua was shocked when he saw this. With a wave of his hands, he raised the wishful staff and smashed it towards the back of the strange insect. Kill! Sun Jian's voice was like spring thunder, and the golden light on his left arm flashed. The strange insect's sawtooth mouth couldn't bite him, and Sun Jian took advantage of the situation to swing his right hand, and the three-pointed double-edged sword was inserted into the back of the strange insect. Shwa! The three-pointed double-edged sword flashed with golden light, and a deep crack immediately appeared on the back of the strange insect. At the same time, a ray of clear light burst out from the strange insect's body, and the strange insect's body expanded rapidly. Chapter 3392. Peng. With a loud bang, Xiaohua's wishful steel staff also arrived and smashed a large part of the strange insect's back. However, the gray mist that had previously covered the strange insect's body was now rising again. The strange insect's body fluctuated rapidly in the mist, sometimes big and sometimes small. As the strange insect's mist rapidly retreated into its body, the clear light was gradually obscured, and the scars of the three-pointed, double-edged sword slowly disappeared. When Sun Jian saw this, his eyes flashed with extreme panic. No one knew the power of the three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand, and no one knew the power of the Kunlun mirror. These two treasures together could not kill the strange insect. How many methods in the world could threaten this strange insect? Just as Sun Jian was panicking, Xiaohua's eyes narrowed slightly, and the wishful steel staff in his hand quietly retracted. This was because he had already seen that the spirit fire that had just been sent into the air was sucked into the crescent-shaped groove by the strange insect along with a few strands of lightning. Fellow Immortal Xiao. Sun Jian's voice sounded in Xiaohua's ear, and his tone was very bitter. This Sun said too much. This strange insect is too powerful. I'm afraid it's an alien species. You should make other plans. While this strange insect has not yet completely refined the noble qi in its body. Oh, Right when Sun Wu hung his head dejectedly and was about to discuss how to escape with Xiaohua, a rumbling sound suddenly resounded from within the strange insect's body. The strange insect's body instantly expanded to a size of around 15 meters, and then the gray mist around it expanded even more before shrinking to a size of around 10 meters. But right after that, the strange insect's body expanded once more. And then there was no more. A spark was produced in the mouth of the strange insect, and the entire body of the strange insect was no longer under its control. It suddenly grew to the size of 100 feet. Ping! With a loud sound, the strange insect's body completely burst open, and countless flames rushed out of the strange insect's body. The power of the strange insect's explosion was not great, but the strange thing was that the entire space trembled at an extremely fast speed, and the four corners of the space flashed with a dark brilliance. The dark brilliance quickly dissipated, and the light of the entire space gradually dimmed. Go! Sun Jian roared first. This place is about to collapse. Fellow Immortal Shao, please follow this sun out. If you are not careful, you will be implicated by the collapse into the void. I'm afraid it will be difficult to return to the space node. Alright. Xiaohua scanned the area with his divine sense, but he didn't find any strange insect's soul essence. Knowing that he had indeed killed this strange insect, he didn't hesitate to agree and flew up with Sun Jian. But just as Xiaohua was about to fly up, a strange feeling suddenly emerged from his heart. Xiaohua almost instantly shouted, "Fellow immortal son, be careful." Then, his entire body abruptly flew backward. Even as he was flying, his entire waist was also rapidly leaning backwards. When Sun Jian saw Xiaohua's sudden change, his complexion changed greatly. He thought that Xiaohua wanted to take his void-penetrating beast and flee. Unconsciously, he swung the three-pointed, double-edged blade in his hand. Just as he was about to give chase, before Sun Jian's figure could fly, a loud sound rang out. A huge force came from the three-pointed, double-edged blade. Sun Jian's right arm went numb, and he almost couldn't hold the weapon in his hand. When he took a closer look, he found that one of the legs of the insect that had just exploded was stuck in his three-pointed, double-edged sword. Hiss! Sun Jian sucked in a breath of cold air. A feeling of surviving a disaster arose spontaneously. The appearance of this hind leg was so strange that he couldn't detect it at all. If it weren't for Xiaohua's warning, he was afraid that he would have been stabbed by this hind leg. Even if he didn't die here, the injury he received would certainly be heavy. Thinking about his guess about Xiaohua just now, Sun Jian's face unconsciously became slightly hot. At this moment, Xiaohua also saw the result. The other hind leg of the strange insect also stretched out from the void and flew past Xiaohua's lying chest. Xiaohua's eyes were sharp and his hands were nimble. He raised his hand and used the heaven and earth sleeve technique to take this object into his space. Xiaohua's figure didn't change, and his divine sense swept out once more. Meanwhile, Sun Jian opened his eyes, and a faint golden brilliance flashed out from his eyes as he looked around. After looking around for an entire moment, Sun Jian called out, "I'm afraid it's fine. Fellow immortal Shao, let's leave quickly." Sun Jian seemed to be very familiar with this place. He flew to a place in the space, looked around, and raised the Kunlun mirror in his hand. Another beam of light shot out from the mirror and shot into the space. Then, Sun Jian looked at the three-pointed, double-edged sword in his hand and put away the strange insect's hind leg. He looked at the broken weapon with some heartache. He raised his hand and drew in the air. A shallow crack appeared in front of him. Sun Jian stretched out his hand and grabbed one side of the crack. As if he was pulling, the crack actually opened up. Sun Jian lowered his head and drilled into the crack. Xiaohua, who was watching from the side, was dumbfounded. Damn it, this Sun Jian can actually tear space apart with his hand? If Xiaohua didn't see it with his own eyes, he wouldn't dare to believe it. What kind of divine ability was this? Of course, Sun Jian's move couldn't be denied as a show of force. Xiaohua couldn't help but be vigilant. After passing through several similar spaces, Sun Jian and Xiaohua arrived at a small space filled with clouds. Sun Jian entered the space and found a cloud to stand on. His golden eyes swept across the entire space. Slowly, the golden light around him dissipated, and his avatar returned to its original state. Xiaohua also stood several meters away from Sun Jian. His body flickered with brilliance, and he also withdrew his heavenly laws embodiment technique. Fellow immortal Xiao. Sun Jian looked at Xiaohua and said, "Where did this strange insect come from? Why is it so strange? Even if it was killed, how could it still attack us?" Xiaohua smiled bitterly and cupped his hands. Fellow immortal Sun, this Xiao thanks fellow immortal for your help. If I didn't meet fellow immortal Sun today, this Xiao wouldn't know whether this Xiao's luck would be good or bad. Sun Jian faintly glanced at Xiaohua and said with a double meaning, "Unpredictable luck? That's not necessarily true. If fellow immortal Sun didn't intervene in the end, that strange insect might not have been killed." Hee. Xiaohua knew that Sun Jian saw something strange, but he didn't point it out. He continued, "As for fellow immortal Sun's question about the origin of the strange insect, this Xiao isn't clear. It was just a chance encounter. And it seems like it really is an alien creature." Sun Jian nodded. "This insect doesn't seem to have any soul. It's already so powerful, but when it was attacked just now, I didn't see any soul essence appear. If it was something from the Thousand Demons' sacred realm, I'm afraid it would have already used its soul essence to escape." "That's right. This Xiao also examined it just now, and I didn't see any soul essence. Moreover, this Xiao has a magic treasure that's effective against souls, but it's ineffective against this insect." Xiaohua also nodded. "In addition, this insect is addicted to vital energy. It's not afraid of the Taoists' vital energy of heaven and earth or the Confucian cultivators' vital energy. If fellow immortal Sun didn't use the method of fighting poison with poison, we really wouldn't have been able to kill it. Fortunately, there's only one of this kind of alien creature. If there were another half of it, this Sun would also have to flee." Sun Jian smiled in a relaxed manner. Thinking about the matter of face that Sun Jian mentioned just now, Xiaohua also smiled. He stretched out his hand and said, "Fellow immortal Sun, do you have a Qiankuan bag? I can return the void-penetrating beast to you." Sun Jian raised his eyebrows and was rather surprised. He was originally thinking about how to ask Xiaohua and what price he should pay to get the void-penetrating beast back. He didn't expect that after a few words, Xiaohua would directly ask to return it. "Many thanks, fellow immortal." Sun Jian naturally wouldn't be negligent. He touched his chest and took out a Qiankuan bracelet and handed it to Xiaohua. Xiaohua also took out a small Qiankuan bag and pretended to put the void-penetrating beast into the Qiankuan bracelet. He handed it to Sun Jian and said, "All right, it's returned to its owner." After receiving the Qiankuan bracelet, Sun Jian scanned it with his vital sense. Sure enough, he saw that the void-penetrating beast was still inside without a single hair missing. Sun Jian almost didn't dare to believe his eyes. He hurriedly said, "Fellow immortal Xiao, please wait a moment. After I take out the void-penetrating eye, I'll return the other things to you. This is what I promised earlier." "Ha, do as you wish." Xiaohua chuckled. Actually, he was already muttering in his heart. Even if you want to take the void-penetrating eye, why don't you first leave the spatial meridian and arrive at hidden immortal continent? But after only a short moment, Sun Jian spoke with a difficult expression. "Fellow immortal Xiao, I have no choice but to go back on my word once more." "What?" Xiaohua was stunned and asked curiously. Sun Jian raised the Qiankuan bracelet in his hand and explained. "Even though the void-penetrating eye on the void-penetrating beast is undamaged, the void-penetrating beast's vital essence has been completely exhausted. It's not suitable to take out the void-penetrating eye now. Only after the void-penetrating beast recovers its vital essence can the void-penetrating eye be taken out in perfect condition. So, I can't return the things I promised fellow immortal now. Otherwise, all of my painstaking efforts would be for naught." So that's how it is." Xiaohua thought in his heart and hurriedly waved his hand. "I understand. I'll give it to fellow immortal. I don't have the qualifications to make a fuss about it with fellow immortal." "That won't do." Unexpectedly, Sun Jian shook his head in all seriousness. "How could I be someone that goes back on my word? After I take out the void-penetrating eye, I will give the other parts to fellow Immortal. However, fellow Immortal will have to wait for a few more years. It's fine, it's fine. Xiaohua had already obtained a lot from the Void Meridian, so he did not want to argue with Sun Jian anymore. He nodded and said, "When you and I return to the hidden Immortal continent, fellow Immortal will give me the address. I will go and find fellow Immortal when I have time in the future. Fellow Immortal should tell me the location of the cave." Sun Jian laughed. "I don't know when I can return this item to you." But Xiaohua laughed. "If nothing unexpected happens, I will be the imperial advisor of you province's Jianghu country in the future. Fellow Immortal will know if you ask around." "All right, I'll remember it." Sun Jian nodded, and then said embarrassedly, "In addition, there is no way out from the spatial node here to the hidden Immortal continent. Fellow Immortal Xiao, you can either return to the hidden Immortal continent through the passage you came from, or go out nearby. However, when I was chasing after the void-penetrating beast, a large-scale void storm appeared in this spatial node, causing the entire node to be extremely unstable. If nothing unexpected happens, it won't be long before this place collapses, and this spatial node won't exist either. Therefore, if I were fellow Immortal, I definitely wouldn't take the risk and would make plans after leaving." Chapter 3393. Xiaohua was stunned. He was the one who added fuel to the fire in the void storm, so it was normal for the space node to be unstable. However, he didn't agree that it would immediately collapse. However, he still asked curiously, "Fellow Immortal's son, are you not going to return to the hidden Immortal continent?" "Yes, I have other things to do, so I won't be returning for the time being," Sun Jian replied. Xiaohua was in a difficult position. He smiled bitterly and said, "Then where is the nearest space node?" At this point, Xiaohua suddenly understood. If it's not the hidden Immortal continent, then it must be the Pure Land and the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. Since Sun Jian chased the void-penetrating beast to this place, if I'm not wrong, the nearest should be the Thousand Demons' sacred realm. The Pure Land world. Sun Jian's words killed Xiaohua's guess. If fellow Immortal is willing, I can send fellow Immortal to the Pure Land world. However, I'm not sure where in the Pure Land world this place is. Haha. When Xiaohua heard this, he almost laughed out loud. What was his biggest wish after arriving at the 3 continents? Wasn't it just going to the Pure Land world? Wasn't it just to wake Jianghu up? Now, he could actually arrive at the Pure Land world without using any heavenly steeds or crossing the ocean. What was there for Xiaohua to be unhappy about? Xiaohua suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and cupped his hands. "If so, fellow Immortal, please send me to the Pure Land world." "Fellow Immortal, you're a Taoist disciple. You have to be careful in the Buddhist sect's territory." Sun Jian didn't say much. He activated the Kunlun mirror and brought Xiaohua across several spaces. As they flew, he reminded, Buddhist sect's bald donkeys are people who don't mean what they say. Don't let them see through you. Hee, if I don't say it myself, how would they know that I'm a Taoist? Xiaohua smiled and touched his bald head. Sun Jian smiled and nodded. That's true. If fellow Immortal wasn't wearing a Taoist robe, I would really think that fellow Immortal is a Buddhist sect's disciple. As he spoke, Sun Jian took out the Kunlun mirror. He waved the 3-pointed, double-edged blade again, and a small gap appeared in the void. As the gap appeared, a biting cold wind blew in, followed by fresh air. "Fellow Immortal Xiao, please." Sun Jian put away his weapon and flew a few hundred feet away. He made way for the gap and cupped his hands with a smile. The green hills never change and the green waters flow forever. "Fellow Immortal Sun, we'll meet again." Xiaohua knew Sun Jian's intentions. He cupped his hands in salute and stepped out of the gap. Then, lightning flashed around his body as he flew into the distance. The gap high up in the sky gradually closed up. Sun Jian's eyes looked through the gap at the spot where Xiaohua had disappeared. As he looked at the swirling snowflakes, a thoughtful expression flashed in his eyes. He muttered to himself, "This Xiaohua is a kind and righteous person. Previously, he did not flee by himself. Later on, he even helped me kill the strange insect. In the end, he even completely handed over the void-penetrating beast to me. His cultivation may not be as good as mine, but if we really fight, he may not necessarily lose. He still has the void-penetrating beast in his hands. If he threatens this sun with it, it will really make things difficult for this sun. Void-penetrating eye, void-penetrating eye, this true monarch has finally obtained you. When I refine you, my divine power will definitely reach a higher level. At that time, even if I have to face Saint One, I won't be afraid. Sun Jian's figure disappeared, and the gap also gradually closed up. Finally, he disappeared among the palm-sized snowflakes. After 2 hours, Xiaohua's figure slowly appeared on the left side of the gap. He also had a thoughtful expression on his face. He also pinched his chin with his hand and looked at the gap. Who is this Sun Jian? He is almost a Taoist spirit-severing stage cultivator. Especially that Kunlun mirror and the 3-pointed, double-edged sword that can break the void. They are definitely not ordinary. Could it be that this Sun Jian is a member of a first-class family? While talking to himself, Xiaohua patted his forehead with his hand, and the Dharma eye slowly opened. However, Xiaohua didn't use the heavenly eye. Instead, the silver-white eye slowly turned into a pure silver-white. The silver-white eye slowly rotated, and then a silver brilliance fell on the space where the gap was. Open! Xiaohua shouted in a deep voice. The silver light beam roared, and with the rotation of the light beam, a small gap in the void also appeared in the air. I see. Xiaohua was overjoyed. He stretched out an eye and quietly looked inside. He smiled and said, "The delusion breaker Dharma eye has such an effect. If it wasn't for the void-penetrating eye of the void-penetrating beast, this Xiao wouldn't have thought of it. With the Dharma eye, this Xiao can remember the location of this snow mountain. After Lu is settled, this Xiao can also return to the hidden immortal continent through the space meridian." Then, Xiaohua turned his hand again, and a fist-sized silver bead appeared in his left hand. It was condensed from the void-penetrating beast's light beam that rushed into the space transformed by the delusion breaker Dharma eye in Xiaohua's left hand. This is the essence of the void-penetrating beast that Sun Jian was talking about. Xiaohua swept his gaze and sent the silver bead into the Dharma eye imprint on his forehead. He said with a smile, "If this Xiao can refine the essence of this void-penetrating beast, I'm afraid that the delusion breaker Dharma eye and heavenly eye will rise to another level." Xiaohua was really happy. He raised his head and laughed loudly. That laughter shook the surrounding snowflakes into powder. Xiaohua thought for a moment and looked at the snowflakes that covered the sky, which blocked his vision like this. It even covered the snow mountain that he was on. Then he directly descended and used his divine sense to mark the snow mountain with his divine sense. Only then did he release his Buddhist sense and looked around. He casually found a piece of clothing that wasn't a Taoist robe from the space and put it on. Then he didn't fly far, but landed on the snow mountain. He stepped on the snowy ground with large strides and walked down the mountain. Because in his Buddhist sense, he already saw that there was a temple built on the mountainside of the snow mountain. The snow was very heavy, and the snowflakes were the size of a palm. They fell on Xiaohua's bare head, and also fell on Xiaohua's nondescript clothing. They even fell on the foot of the snow mountain. The snow on the foot of the mountain was at least a foot thick, and under the layer of snow, it was extremely smooth. It was obviously a thick layer of ice. In this kind of weather, ordinary cultivators would release their true qi to protect themselves. Cultivators who cultivated to the gold core realm would have a protective golden light. Even if they didn't do it deliberately, they would still be able to block all the dust, raindrops, and snowflakes outside their body. However, Xiaohua was an exception. Although he didn't like dust, sometimes he also liked raindrops and snowflakes very much. Just like now, he withdrew the protective golden light and didn't even leak a trace of true qi. Previously, he slightly revealed his Confucian cultivation base, but now he was completely concealed under the secret soul cultivation technique. He was like an ordinary young man, walking step by step on the snow mountain. His whole body was already snowy white. If Xiaohua wasn't walking, Others would definitely not see such a white in this vast white world. The snow mountain was extremely high, and the small temple was built halfway up the snow mountain. Xiaohua walked down the faintly discernible mountain path step by step, and it took him no less than 2 hours. During these 2 hours, Xiaohua's heart was like the world in the snow. The dust in his heart was slowly washed away by his slow steps. Even the impetuousness in the void and the bloodthirst from using the demon world's blood drop paradise gradually subsided. Once again, Xiaohua's state of mind was like an ancient well without ripples. Although Xiaohua couldn't see the nascent soul in his lower dantian, Xiaohua could clearly sense that the newborn nascent soul was also sitting cross-legged in the original location of the nebula in his lower dantian. Its hands were forming hand seals, and it was cultivating with its 5 hearts facing the sky. Seeing the corner of the small temple on the side of the pine tree not far away, the corner of Xiaohua's mouth curled up. He looked left and right, and the path under his feet had already appeared. The place covered in snow was obviously a bit shorter than the other places. Xiaohua stepped on the path, but in his heart he secretly thought, "This Xiao's nascent soul is a bit strange. Not to mention that all the meridians in my body are opened, even the image of my nascent soul is faintly discernible. Previously, when it climbed out of my body and arrogantly pointed at the world, I could still see its shadow, but when it entered my dantian, it disappeared. Also, although this nascent soul looks like me, but why does it look like a huge nebula most of the time? Even the color of its skin is very different. Not to mention when it's hidden, when it's revealed, it's not necessarily black and white or 7 colors. As the saying goes, the appearance is born from the heart. This Xiao's Dharma idol is naturally this Xiao's image, and that spiritual idol Dharma body is also the image of this Xiao's nascent soul. Naturally, this nascent soul should also be this Xiao's image. This is without a doubt, but why does it often give this Xiao the illusion that it's a nebula? Nebula? Thinking of the nebula, Xiaohua's body trembled, and he was stunned on the spot. The heavenly Tao starry sky? Isn't the heavenly Tao starry sky made up of all the nebulas? In other words, the nascent soul is not born from me, but from my Tao foundation. The nascent soul is the result of my cultivation. I have succeeded in comprehending the heavenly Tao. Although it's only in the so-called heaven glimpse realm, this heaven glimpse realm is also integrated into my Tao foundation, and now it's manifested in this nascent soul. Heavenly Tao, oh heavenly Tao, only the heavenly Tao is the pinnacle of my Tao cultivation. Even if I cultivate a nascent soul, I still have to rely on the nascent soul to strengthen my Tao foundation, and use the nascent soul to comprehend the heavenly Tao. Since the foundation of the Tao sect is the heavenly Tao, then what is the end of the Tao sect cultivator's cultivation? Also, the foundation of soul cultivation is the 9 heavens of spirit origin? What is the pinnacle of soul cultivation? Xiaohua, who had made great progress in his Tao sect cultivation, couldn't help but have a shocking thought. The foundation of Confucian cultivation is the 5 Qis unification? What is the pinnacle of Confucian cultivation? The foundation of Buddhism, what is it? It can't be Buddha's Saraira, right? The pinnacle of Buddhism is Buddha? Is it the fruit of Buddhism? Dang! Right at this moment, a muffled sound was like a blow to the head. Then, a burst of ice-cold energy fell from the sky, and some even fell on Xiaohua's neck. Xiaohua was startled, and he hastily raised his head, only to see that in front of him was a strange tree that was 9 zhang tall. When he lowered his head to think, he bumped into the tree trunk, and with this collision, the snow on the strange tree's branches and leaves fell down one after another, revealing a half-qi-long leaf that looked like a heart and also like an eye. Chapter 3394. Xiaohua raised his head and looked at the leaf, somewhat astonished. Under the heavy snow, the leaf was still verdant, without the slightest trace of wilting or yellow. The contrast between the snow white and the green of the leaf made the vitality of the green leaf even more obvious. Looking at the tree trunk that he had crashed into, he realized that it was different from an ordinary tree trunk. This tree trunk was several feet in size, and it was not an independent tree trunk. Instead, It was formed by dozens of tree trunks clustered together. These dozens of tree trunks were rugged and coiled together into a cluster. Each of the individual tree trunks was strong and powerful, and the bottom of the tree trunks was deeply embedded in the snow-covered foothills. When he reached the middle of the tree trunk, these dozens of tree trunks coiled together into one. Branches, leaves, and leaves spread out from the top of this tree trunk, covering an area of several hundred feet to his left. What kind of strange tree is this? The pitiful Xiao Hua came from the barren dawn rain continent of the Buddhist sect, so he naturally didn't know the origin of this tree. He inwardly wondered, this tree doesn't look like an ordinary spiritual tree, but if it isn't a spiritual tree, how can it still maintain its leaves and branches so green in this heavy snow? Thinking of this, Xiao Hua raised his head and looked at the small temple not far away. He smiled and said, "Wouldn't it be fine if I go over and ask?" The small temple wasn't big. It was comparable to the Jianghu mountain range's Jianghu temple. Moreover, the front of the small temple was covered in snow and there were no traces of anyone passing by. Xiao Hua already knew that this must be another dilapidated temple. When Xiao Hua arrived in front of the small temple, he turned his head and looked at the winding footprints he left behind along the way. A kind of understanding appeared in his heart. Wild geese leave their sound when they pass by, people leave their names when they pass by. This Xiao only occasionally passed by this mountain and left behind such a heavy snow. Although the sky is clear after the snow, and no one knows this Xiao's journey, but what about this Xiao's heart? What about this Xiao's memories? What about the great master of this temple? Forget it, forget it. The person's journey, the shadow of heaven and earth, the chaos of the world. Who can understand? Xiao Hua suddenly felt that he seemed to have aged a lot. Everything would make him sad. He hurriedly shook his head and looked at the plaque above the small temple. Wuxia? The signboard of the temple was clearly written in Sanskrit. Xiao Hua could also be considered to be able to read it, but this signboard was truly very old. It looked almost as old as the spiritual herbs in Xiao Hua's space. Therefore, the writing on the signboard had long been blurred. Xiao Hua tried to decipher it a few times and simply gave up. He lifted his foot and was about to walk up the steps to knock on the similarly tattered temple door. Suddenly, Xiao Hua stopped, because the steps in front of the temple gate were abnormally clean, with only a few snowflakes drifting down with the wind. It was clear that someone had just cleaned it. Xiao Hua hastily retreated a few steps and shook his body. The snowflakes around him flew up, revealing Xiao Hua's unusually dry clothes. But just as those snowflakes were about to fall, Xiao Hua seemed to have thought of something. With a wave of his hand, all of the snowflakes once again landed on his body. Then, Xiao Hua extended his hand and wiped his head. Then he patted his body several dozen times, shaking off most of the accumulated snow. After leaving a portion of the accumulated snow, he respectfully stepped forward and knocked on the bronze ring on the temple's door. Dang, dang, dang. The sound of the door knocker wasn't loud, but it was very clear. Amidst the shuffling of the falling snow and the whooshing of the breeze, the sound of the door knocker spread far and wide. However, after a moment, he didn't hear any sound coming from inside the temple gate, nor did he hear any footsteps. I know. Xiao Hua tentatively pushed the door. The temple gate was unlatched, so when he pushed it open, there wasn't any screen wall in front of him, but rather a small open space. The first thing that entered Xiao Hua's eyes was an orange-red mass. When Xiao Hua focused his eyes, he could already see clearly that it was a monk wearing strange orange-red clothing lying on top of a pile of snow. On the other side of the monk was a half-swept open space. Seeing this, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. Just as he was about to fly over to rescue the monk, he saw the motionless monk's entire body twitch. Then, slowly and with great difficulty, he curled up from the ground and crawled up. At this moment, Xiao Hua could see clearly that this was an old man who was over 60 years old. The skin on his face was very dark red, and his entire face was covered with wrinkles, just like a walnut. Under his snow-white eyebrows, there was only a kind of turbidity in his eyes. The old monk stood up. First, he looked around. Then, he slowly bent down and picked up a strange orange-red hat that looked like a coxcomb from the ground. He carefully knocked off the snow on the hat, then carefully put it on his bald head. Xiaohua could see clearly that although the old monk was careful, there seemed to be a problem with his eyes. Cleaning the hat was completely based on his intuition. At the end of the strange hat, there were a lot of snow that he didn't knock off. After putting on the hat, the old monk bent down again with great difficulty. He picked up a broom from the ground and slowly started sweeping. Although the old monk was sweeping, he was sweeping too slowly. The snowflakes in the sky were too big. Just as he swept, another snowflake fell. It was as if the old monk hadn't swept at all. Xiaohua quietly stood at the entrance of the temple. He didn't make a sound, nor did he approach. He only silently watched. This old monk was completely different from Seven Suns Temple's Dao Shan. One was in the hidden Immortal continent, the other was in the Western Paradise. One was a disciple of the Dao sect, the other was a disciple of the Buddhist sect. However, in Xiaohua's eyes, the two of them didn't seem to be any different. The broom that the old monk waved was very similar to the spoon that Dao Shan used to give porridge. They were both so firm and so persistent. Seeing that the empty space wasn't that big, the old monk swept it for the time it took to eat a meal. When the old monk turned around, the entire empty space was covered in a layer of snow. This empty space was a small square in front of the temple's main hall. It wasn't like the steps in front of the temple that were blocked by eaves. Seeing that the old monk didn't say anything and didn't even raise his head and started sweeping again, Xiaohua could only cough. The snowflakes were so big and the old monk's movements were so slow. Xiaohua didn't doubt that unless the snow stopped, the old monk would never be able to finish sweeping. Unfortunately, Xiaohua's ordinary cough didn't attract the old monk's attention. The broom was still sweeping the empty space. Xiaohua raised his head and looked at the somewhat gloomy main hall. After hesitating for a moment, he still released his Buddhist sense. After taking a rough look, he knew that there was no one else in this temple other than the old monk. Xiaohua could only walk in front of the old monk. He clasped his hands together and called out, "Amitabha Buddha. Elder, how are you?" The old monk acted as if he didn't hear Xiaohua's words, or perhaps he was simply unfazed by the chaos. He snorted and ignored Xiaohua. After sweeping several feet in front of Xiaohua, he seemed to have suddenly understood. He slowly raised his head and looked at Xiaohua with his murky eyes. When his gaze landed on Xiaohua's bald head, he slowly hugged the broom in his arms and clasped his hands together. "Amitabha, you've finally come." "I'm finally here? Elder, what do you mean?" Xiaohua was somewhat puzzled. However, he wasn't surprised because in Xiaohua's eyes, the old monk didn't see his face at all. He only saw his bald head. Other than the old monk mistaking him for someone else, he didn't make any other guesses. "Elder, you mistook me for someone else," Xiaohua said with a smile. Everything about the old monk was slow, whether it was sweeping or speaking. However, since the old monk spoke, the old monk didn't pay attention to Xiaohua's words. He asked again, "What is your Buddhist name?" The old monk's words just happened to interrupt Xiaohua. Xiaohua faintly smiled. He knew that the old monk didn't listen to his words, so he replied, "I don't need to mention my Buddhist name." That's right, Xiaohua didn't shave his head. He wasn't an orthodox Buddhist disciple. Where did his Buddhist name come from? However, the old monk seemed to be able to understand at this time. He nodded slightly and said, "Oh, so you're called Bodhi." Bodhi? Xiaohua didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This old monk was really good at interrupting. He actually found his Buddhist name in such a short time. The old monk was even more interesting. After saying this sentence, he picked up the broom again. He seemed to have forgotten Xiaohua and started sweeping the snow again. He swept for a moment before he stopped and said slowly, "Bodhi, Bodhi? My Buddhist sect doesn't seem to have this seniority." "Oh, right, little monk, you're a layman disciple of my Buddhist sect?" "Yes, I'm a layman disciple." Xiaohua thought for a moment and could only reply. He didn't enter the Buddhist sect and cultivated the Buddhist sect's cultivation method. It was appropriate to say that he was a layman disciple. However, Xiaohua was very doubtful whether the old monk heard him say this sentence. Because after saying this sentence, the old monk started sweeping the snow again. It seemed that if the snow didn't stop, he wouldn't stop sweeping. Besides sweeping the snow, he didn't do anything else. Xiaohua sighed. He knew that his purpose of inquiring about information wouldn't be realized. After thinking for a moment, he bowed and said, "I won't disturb the elder's cultivation. I'll take my leave." Just as he stood up, the old monk raised his head again. His turbid eyes didn't know whether he was looking at Xiaohua or at the temple door behind Xiaohua. He said, "This poor monk has been waiting in this Shaolin Long temple for 90 years. Now, this poor monk has reached the point where the oil lamp has dried up. Calculating, you should have come in 2 days. This poor monk has finally completed the mission of my Shaolin Long temple and led the future Buddha to the Pure Land world." Boom. In an instant, Xiaohua's bald head seemed to be bombarded by a pillar of awe-inspiring qi. When Xiaohua heard the words, Shaolin Long Temple, he immediately thought of his exquisite leaf scripture. When the old monk said the words, future Buddha, although the old monk's words were very soft and even somewhat inaccurate, in Xiaohua's ears, it was almost like a bolt from the blue. Large beads of sweat seeped out from the top of his head. His whole body was slightly swaying. Looking at the monk sweeping the snow in front of him, an indescribable strangeness arose from the bottom of his heart. Chapter 3395. Elder. Xiaohua's voice is almost trembling. He stares at the old monk and says tentatively, "I just came here to ask for directions. How did I become the future Buddha?" Unfortunately, the old monk lowered his head again, turning a deaf ear to Xiaohua's words as he continued sweeping the snow. How could Xiaohua, who had already planned to leave, move again? He stood there quietly, staring at the old monk without blinking. His Buddhist sense had been fully released, covering the entire Shaolin Long temple. His eyes were full of disbelief, and his heart was thumping wildly. He was thinking about the credibility of the old monk's words. Snowflakes were still falling, and there was no wind in the Shaolin Long temple. The old monk had just swept 30% of the courtyard when Xiaohua made up his mind. There were too many unimaginable things in this world. Jiuxia's art of clairvoyance, the Shaman King's art of divine connection, and his hand of karma. Jiuxia could predict that he would appear in Huan Kingdom, the Shaman King could predict that he would appear in Meng Mountains, and this senior of the Buddhist sect could predict that he would appear in this Shaolin Long temple 90 years ago. It was nothing, and Xiaohua chose to believe it. However, Xiaohua was still puzzled. How could this old monk recognize him at a glance? Could it be that he knew that he would come today? Or did the senior of the Buddhist sect leave behind an image? If he knew that he would come today 90 years ago and left behind an image, would that senior know about his lost treasure in the Western Ocean? Or perhaps, if he had changed his appearance when he was forming his nascent soul in the void, would this old monk still be able to recognize him? Looking at the old monk sweeping the snow, Xiaohua waved his hand, and the seal of ocean-turning seal flew out of the void and rushed into the sky. Its bronze brilliance covered the entire Shaolin Long temple tightly, and no more snowflakes would fall. The old monk naturally would not look up. He swept the snow in the yard with a broom and suddenly raised his head again. He did not care whether Xiaohua was beside him or not. He opened his mouth and said, "Beauty, don't be surprised." When Master accepted this poor monk, he had already said that the mission of Xiling Long Temple is to wait for the arrival of the future Buddha Lord. If a disciple can't find another disciple in his life, then he will definitely be able to wait for the arrival of the future Buddha Lord in his life. After saying this, the old monk swept the snow again until all the snow was piled up in the corner of the courtyard. Then, he trembled to the door of the main hall, carefully placed the broom next to the thick pillar, bent down with difficulty, and randomly chose a row of large vats. He removed the wooden lid on the vats, took out a small wooden spoon, scooped up the water in the vats, and drank 2 mouthfuls. He wiped the water stains on the corner of his mouth with his strange monk robe and said, "This poor monk has tried every means to accept a disciple in his life, but he has never accepted a disciple. Therefore, this poor monk knows that the glory of welcoming the future Buddha must fall on this poor monk." However, this poor monk still didn't expect that the Buddha would come so late. "It's so late that this poor monk can't do anything for the Buddha." "Elder." Xiaohua walked in front of the old monk and asked with a smile, "Elder, what's your Dharma name? Elder, why do you suddenly think that I'm the future Buddha? Could it be that no one has ever come to the Shaolin Long Temple? This poor monk's Dharma name? Don't mention it. This poor monk doesn't even remember what it's called." This time, the old monk really heard Xiaohua's voice and replied, "It's not that no one has ever come to my Shaolin Long Temple. Usually, there are monks who stay, and there are also devout benefactors. However, if it's someone like the Buddha who doesn't speak the language of my pure land, then there's not a single one. To be a disciple of my Shaolin Long Temple, being able to communicate with the Buddha is the most important thing. This poor monk often talks to himself when he has nothing to do, so he won't forget these words." Moreover, as he spoke, the old monk opened his mouth again, and actually used the language of the Dawn Rain continent to say, "Could it be that the Buddha wants this poor monk to say these strange words? These words, this poor monk can't say too much." Of course, the old monk's words were very jerky, and even some of his words were inaccurate, but Xiaohua heard it clearly. This was the language of the Dawn Rain continent that he hadn't heard for a long time. Hiss! This, how is this possible? Xiaohua sucked in a breath of cold air. His previous doubts were all gone. He had forgotten that the writing and language of the Pure Land and the hidden Immortal continent were different. Just as he entered the temple, he spoke the language of the Confucian cultivators of the hidden Immortal continent to the old monk, and the old monk also responded accordingly. Now that he thought about it, just now, the old monk really seemed to be talking to himself. Now that the old monk actually spoke the language of the Dawn Rain continent, how could Xiaohua not be surprised? What happened next was even more out of Xiaohua's expectations. The old monk didn't bring him to the main hall of the temple and didn't say much to him. Instead, he walked to a small house on the left side of the temple. Not long after, a burst of smoke floated out of the window of the small house, and then a kind of faint fragrance floated out from inside. Xiaohua didn't follow. Now that he was surprised, he walked to the door of the small house and stuck his head out to take a look. This small house looked like a kitchen. There were some neatly arranged firewood inside, and there was also a small stove. On top of the stove, there was a small iron pot. At this moment, something was cooking inside. That thing looked very viscous, and along with the fire, it rolled around with a gurgling sound. When the fire under the stove was gradually extinguished, the old monk took out a pot and 2 crude big bowls from the wooden cabinet next to the stove. Using his withered hand, which only had bones left, he picked up the small iron pot and poured the viscous liquid into the pot. Then, he took out several bottles and jars from the wooden cabinet, and took out some ordinary-looking ingredients and put them into the pot. The old monk picked up the pot and slightly shook it a few times. Unexpectedly, some yellowish liquid was poured out from the pot. When the 2 big bowls were filled, the old monk carefully picked up a bowl and handed it to Xiaohua and said, "This is my Snowy Mountain special butter tea, try it." This thing was this poor monk's favorite 10 years ago. In recent years, in order to maintain this poor monk's body, I haven't used it for a long time. Since you've come today, this poor monk will also satisfy this craving. Xiaohua smelled the aroma of the butter tea, and there was a strong meaty smell inside. He was quite unhappy in his heart, but when he heard the old monk's words, his heart was slightly sour. Respectfully taking the big bowl, Xiaohua said, "This poor monk thanks Elder. Thank Elder for guarding this place for more than 90 years. Finished speaking, Xiaohua raised the big bowl and drank the butter tea into his stomach. A warm feeling came from his stomach, and even more so from the bottom of his heart. The old monk naturally didn't have Xiaohua's good appetite. He only drank half of it, but he couldn't drink any more. With a sigh, he put the big bowl on the stove, looked at it with some regret, and said with a bitter smile, "After not drinking for so many years, this poor monk is afraid that he can't drink any more." Xiaohua's eyebrows jumped, and he said with a smile, "If you didn't meet me, then it would have been fine. But since you let me come to Shaolin Long Temple?" At this point, Xiaohua hurriedly shut his mouth. He didn't dare to say anything else. It seemed that before this, as long as he had the intention, there wouldn't be a good outcome for anyone who took the rejuvenation pill. and the old monk in front of him was already on the verge of death. Xiaohua couldn't guarantee that his rejuvenation pill would be effective on him. The old monk didn't listen to Xiaohua's words at all, nor did he look at Xiaohua. He immediately said, "Buddha wants to thank a lot of people, this poor monk is only one of them. Shaolin Long Temple has been built for 9,999 years. If we wait another 9 days, then it will be 10,000 years. This poor monk doesn't even know how many generations Shaolin Long Temple has passed down. Only the Bodhi tree outside Shaolin Long Temple was planted when Shaolin Long Temple was built. It has witnessed the wind and frost of Shaolin Long Temple for 10,000 years. Xiaohua was shocked again. He looked left and right at the dark room. He really didn't expect that this ordinary temple, without any Buddhist formations or Buddhist lights, would have such a long history. "Buddha Lord, please follow this poor monk." The old monk didn't even lift his eyelids. He slowly walked out of the small hut and walked to the left side of the main hall. He pushed the door and the door opened with a click. There were more than 10 cabinets inside which were densely packed with scriptures. Behind these cabinets, there was a tall Buddhist shrine with many Buddhist archives placed inside. The old monk pointed and said, "This is my Shaolin Long Temple's scripture pavilion. Buddha Lord, in the future, you must read the scriptures here word by word. In my Buddhist sect, although divine abilities are important, the Dharma is the most important." This. Xiaohua wryly smiled and opened his mouth, but he didn't know how to answer. He really came to ask for directions and wanted to know where he wanted to go. He really didn't come to be the future Buddha Lord and didn't want to read any Buddhist scriptures in this Shaolin Long Temple. The old monk didn't wait for Xiaohua to say more. He reached out and closed the door of the main hall. Then he brought Xiaohua to the right side of the main hall and pushed the door open. There was a thick pagoda in the main hall. This pagoda didn't have any Buddhist lights and even looked a bit rough and simple. Moreover, it looked very strange. Layers of railings and stairs were built outside of the pagoda. This is my Shaolin Long Temple's pagoda. Since the establishment of Shaolin Long Temple, all of the disciples' relics are here. After this poor monk passes away, a relic will be left behind. Buddha Lord can place this poor monk's relic on top of it and this pagoda will be complete. Every day, we will chant and pray for Buddha Lord's arrival. These relics are filled with our willpower. When Buddha Lord achieves enlightenment, they will be of great use. The old monk's tone was as calm as water. He pointed at the pagoda and spoke in a very natural manner. It was as if these relics were the butter tea that Xiaohua used earlier and not the true fruits that Buddhist disciples refined for dozens of years. I hope that everyone can read it for free. In addition, fellow Taoist Xianqing has also written a book called Seeking Venerables in the Nine Heavens. Although it is just the beginning, I know that writing a book is not easy, so I hope everyone can support me. I thank everyone on behalf of fellow Taoist Xianqing. Chapter 3396. Xiaohua smiled wryly. Back on the Dawn Rain continent, he had seen the visions of the Tusita heaven and the Kiliacosm of worlds, and knew that the exquisite Leaf Sutra was a technique cultivated by the future Buddhist Lord. But he had never considered becoming the future Buddhist Lord, nor could he ever have guessed that in the great snowy mountain, in the exquisite Leaf Temple, there would be so many monks waiting for him to come. Not only would they pray to him every day, but they would also hand over their sariras after they died. Xiaohua was even more aware that although these relics all carried their own karma, they all had a common obsession. Therefore, if he wanted to achieve the Buddha fruit of the future Buddha Lord, swallowing these relics would definitely be beneficial to him and not harmful to him. However, could Xiaohua swallow these sariras? The old monk seemed to have seen through Xiaohua's thoughts. Of course, it was more likely that he had already prepared the wording. Helping the Buddha Lord to achieve enlightenment is our obsession. Moreover, if the Buddha Lord achieves enlightenment, the sariras will merge with the Buddha Lord. It will also be of great benefit to us. Buddha Lord doesn't need to think too much. Okay, Xiaohua nodded, but he didn't make a decision in his heart. Seeing Xiaohua nod, the old monk closed the door again. He walked to the front of the main hall and looked at the closed door. The future Buddha Lord hasn't come yet. The main hall of my exquisite temple doesn't worship incense. It only opens the door at the end of the year. Now that the Buddha Lord has finally come to the exquisite temple, it's the day when the main hall of my exquisite temple opens. From now on, all the tantric temples in the Pure Land can worship incense. Tantric? Xiao Hua was stunned. He thought of his Buddha seal catalog. Wasn't that thing from Tantric? I'm afraid the Buddha Lord hasn't shaved his head, and he doesn't have a certificate or a Dharma name, right? The old monk looked at the closed door with some excitement and whispered something. Indeed. Xiao Hua didn't deny and replied. The Buddha Lord's Dharma name doesn't need to be based on seniority. The seniors of my exquisite temple said that the future Buddha Lord's Dharma name is what it is. The Buddha Lord's name is Bodhi, so his Dharma name is Bodhi. The old monk continued, however, this Dharma name is used before the Buddha Lord attains karma. After attaining karma, he can only be called Namo Dang Lai Siamethriya. At this point, the old monk seemed to have thought of something. His walnut-like wrinkles rippled with joy. It's the fortune of my 9 lifetimes to be able to shave the future Buddha Lord's head and introduce him to Buddhism. I will definitely attain karma in my next life and become Namo Methriya. Seeing the happiness on this old monk's face, Xiao Hua's heart gives birth to a kind of reverence. This was a joy that came from the bottom of his heart, a sublimation of his faith. Just like the Seven Sons Monastery's Dao Shan, when he saw the leftover porridge in his mouth fall into the mouths of the beggars, he would feel blessed. Every day, when he lit the incense on the wooden tablets in the main hall of the Seven Sons Monastery, he would feel that this was a sign of the Taoist sect. Shanzai, Amitba. Xiao Hua felt the same in his heart and bowed. When the old monk heard Xiao Hua recite the name of Buddha, he felt comfortable no matter how he heard it. He stretched out his hand and was about to push open the door of the hall. However, just as his finger touched the door, he retracted it and very naturally patted his extremely wrinkled forehead. He seemed to be muttering to himself again, you see, this poor monk is really old. The Buddha Lord is going to shave his head today, so naturally he has to make some preparations. First of all, the worries of the mortal fetus on his head must be removed. Next, the Buddha Lord needs to bathe and change clothes. Elder. Xiao Hua smiled and said, this one, Buddha Lord. Unexpectedly, the old monk's ears were very sharp. Xiao Hua just opened his mouth and waved his hand, saying, the word, this one, is used by laymen to express humility. The Buddha Lord has not yet shaved his head, so he can call himself that. However, after shaving his head, he can no longer call himself that. This poor monk is also unworthy of this title. If you call me old monk, this poor monk is already very satisfied. However, all monks call themselves monks, poor monks, and so on. The Buddha Lord will definitely attain Buddha fruit in the future, so you can't be so humble. Calling yourself, this one, or just me, is also good. Xiao Hua was somewhat confused. Isn't this a common way of calling yourself? The old monk smiled and said, the Buddha Lord really hasn't shaved his head, so you don't know much about Buddhism. The Buddhist scriptures that my exquisite temple has collected over the generations, the Buddha Lord must consider every word carefully. Yes, this one knows. Xiao Hua readily accepted, unwilling to make this old monk unhappy. Hearing this, the old monk slightly nodded and pointed outside the temple, saying, let's go, Buddha Lord. This poor monk will take you to the warm water by the mountain stream to wash up. We'll talk while walking. Elder, don't leave the temple. Right now, the sky is filled with wind and snow, it's very inconvenient. Xiao Hua hurriedly said, Elder, you only need to tell me the location. Alas, fine. The old monk lowered his head and looked at his hands and feet, saying with a bitter smile, this poor monk's eyes are blurred, my hands and feet don't listen to my orders. To be able to see the Buddha Lord on the last day is already a blessing. To speak of serving the Buddha Lord, this poor monk's strength is truly beyond my reach. The more the old monk spoke, the more fluent the Tibetan Immortal continent's language became. Many words popped out. It was clear that in these 90 years, he had put in a lot of effort in this aspect. Although the old monk didn't need to send Xiao Hua down, The old monk still insisted on sending him to the temple's entrance. He even said while walking, the Buddha said that the Immeasurable Life Sutra said, "Thus, the small kings scattered, heard that the great king's wife had a wife, came to congratulate her, brought gold, silver, precious treasures, clothes, and the fragrance of flowers, respectfully offered tribute and praised. Immeasurable wife, raised hands to welcome, didn't want to trouble. Since the wife, heaven offers the taste of the masses, nourishes the essence, naturally full, didn't serve the imperial chef. October was over. The crown prince was born. On the 7th of April, the wife went out, past the refugee tree. Flowers bloomed. When the star came out, the wife climbed the branch, fell to the ground from the right side, walked 7 steps, raised hands, heaven and earth. Only I am honored. The 3 realms are suffering. I should be at ease. At the same time, heaven and earth moved. 3,000 great thousand karmic earth. All were enlightened. The 4 kings of Shurfan, along with the officials of the dragon ghosts and deities, Asuran, all came with guards. There were the Dragon King brothers. 1 Garuda, 2 Garudas. The left rain warm water, the right rain cold spring. Shurfan Mo wrapped the heavenly clothes, heavenly rain and the fragrance of flowers, playing the zither and drum music, burning incense, pounding the fragrance of flowers. Void Side Fortress. The first Buddha of the Buddhist sect was born with the words, "Only I am honored in heaven and earth." Although the Buddhist sect hasn't achieved fruition yet, and hasn't even shaved, the word is worthy of it. The old monk recited the Buddhist sutra as if he was familiar with it. He even slowly explained it to Xiaohua. Naturally, there was a lot of Sanskrit mixed in. Xiaohua listened as if he didn't understand, but this "only I am honored in heaven and earth" was clearly heard. Good. Xiaohua said with a smile. This seat understands. Many thanks for elders' teachings. Namu Maitreya Buddha. At this point, the 2 also arrived outside the temple. Although the outside of the temple was completely different from the inside of the temple, the old monk didn't see it at all. He very naturally pointed to a place and said, 999 feet under the Bodhi tree, there is a pool bestowed by Buddha. My Shaolin Long Temple's disciples all bathe and shave there. Yes, elder, please return. This seat has bathed, I will return to the temple. Xiaohua followed the old monk's finger. His Buddhist awareness swept over and immediately saw the location of the pool. He hurriedly said to the old monk. The old monk's eyes were still turbid. He looked left and right, not knowing whether he saw Xiaohua or not, but he said, "Yes, this poor monk will go prepare a monk robe for Buddha Lord. This item is also something my Shaolin Long Temple has prepared. After Buddha Lord bathes, change clothes and shave." Then, when Xiaohua heard about shave, his heart jumped. He hurriedly asked, "Elder, the Buddhist precepts, Buddha Lord rest assured." The old monk had already prepared the words. His dry mouth cracked open and he said with a smile, "Buddha Lord came from afar. Naturally, you don't know the precepts of my tantric sect. My tantric sect is different from other sections. We don't prohibit meat and fish, marriage. Buddha Lord rest assured. Tantric sect doesn't prohibit anything. Besides, you are the future Buddha Lord. Don't you have the final say in all the rules and prohibitions?" That's good. Xiaohua was slightly relieved. He immediately thought of the butter tea the old monk just drank. There was a meat and fish taste in it. After speaking, Xiaohua's feet produced auspicious clouds and he landed toward the pool. The old monk unexpectedly didn't know. He still said with a smile, "My tantric sect is a small branch of Buddhism. We only worship the future Buddha Lord. These precepts were set by Buddha Lord Tathagata. How can we follow them? I won't hide it from Buddha Lord." In the past, this poor monk also had a relationship with the secular world. It's just that it's been too long and there's no news about it. The old monk said a few more words. Seeing that no one answered, he knew that Xiaohua had already left. He slowly turned around and walked toward the main hall of the temple. Just as the old monk was about to push open the door, his body suddenly leaned against the door. As the door opened, the old monk's body fell to the ground again. After half a meal's time, the old monk's body shook a few times. He then slowly climbed up from the ground. He turned his head left and right and sensed that he was in the main hall. A trace of tears slowly flowed down from his turbid eyes. He then walked to the only shabby praying mat in the main hall. He knelt down and kowtowed to the incense table. He whispered, "Namo Mithra Buddha, this disciple's life is coming to an end. Only a few people will know about this disciple's life. This disciple disdains others to know about this disciple. It's fine as long as Buddha Lord can see it clearly. This disciple shaved his head when he was young and has accompanied Buddha Lord for more than 90 years. Since Master returned to the West, this exquisite temple has been guarded by this disciple alone. After more than 60 years, this disciple has finally seen Buddha Lord's body in this life. This disciple's lifelong wish has been achieved. My exquisite temple's mission can be considered completed. This disciple knows that this disciple should be assisting Buddha Lord's body in reading Buddhist scriptures. In the end, this disciple will accompany Buddha Lord on his journey. But this disciple is unworthy. This disciple can no longer endure the laziness of this body. I don't want to stay in this world anymore. Namo Mithra Buddha, this disciple sincerely asks for Buddha Lord's forgiveness. This disciple sincerely asks Buddha Lord to take this disciple back to the Western paradise. Chapter 3397. The old monk's words were close to Sanskrit. Not to mention Xiaohua was not here. Even if Xiaohua was here, he would not be able to hear it clearly. After the old monk kowtowed, he shakily walked out of the main hall and came to a small hut. The hut was very simple. There were only a few old wooden cabinets. The old monk fumbled around in the cabinets and took out a black wooden box. After opening it, there were more than 10 boxes inside. Most of these boxes were empty. Only the bottommost boxes had a few thumb-sized black beads. The old monk stretched out his shriveled finger and took out a black bead. He slowly put it in his mouth, but after hesitating for a moment, he put it back into the box. His turbid eyes seemed to be staring at a certain place in the air. After a moment of pause, he picked up the bead again. After a few times, the old monk finally put the bead back into the box. His mouth trembled as he whispered, "Namo Mithra Buddha, disciple asks Buddha for forgiveness." After saying that, he closed the wooden box and put it back into the wooden cabinet. Then he slowly walked out of the hut. Xiaohua naturally did not know that Tantric Buddhism had always thrived in the snowy mountains. Their living environment was the most bitter and cold. In order to reproduce, in order to cultivate Buddhism, it was impossible for them to forbid meat and marriage. Xiaohua wanted to refine Buddhism's cultivation method and become the future Buddha Lord. It seemed that only by shaving his head and becoming a monk could he truly learn the true essence of Buddhism. In this way, this Tantric Buddhism branch was suitable. Moreover, the exquisite leaf scripture was originally the cultivation method of the future Buddha Lord. This exquisite leaf temple had been waiting for Xiaohua on this snowy mountain for tens of thousands of years. Everything seemed to be a matter of course. However, Xiaohua, who was flying in the air, was actually moving very slowly. He could not help but think in his heart, this Xiao just came to ask for directions. Really, just to ask for directions. I don't have any other thoughts. How could I encounter such a strange thing? Although Xiaohua had already used divination to convince himself in his heart, when he thought about how he was about to become a monk and become the future Buddha Lord, which was more powerful than Guanyin Bodhisattva, he could not help but mutter in his heart. This exquisite leaf temple, it was actually built 10,000 years ago just to wait for this Xiao? 10,000 years ago. Even I don't know where I was. Since this Buddhist sect senior from 10,000 years ago already knows of this Xiao, then, does the current Buddhist Lord also know of this Xiao? Besides, although I've been expelled from the Imperial Thunder sect, I'm still a genuine disciple of the Tao sect. What's the point of shaving my head? Even Frost Bamboo didn't really shave his head to become a monk, right? Xiaohua had already thought of this before, but now, he couldn't help but think about it carefully. This was because the thought of running away in Xiaohua's heart was growing stronger and stronger. If he wasn't soft-hearted and couldn't bear to see the old monk's sincerity, he would have already run away in a sorry state. The key point was that Xiaohua didn't want to hurt the old monk's heart, and even more, he didn't want to fail to live up to the painstaking efforts and expectations of who knows how many generations of Shaolin Long Temple's abbots over the past 10,000 years. Xiaohua really wants to run away. The temptation of exquisite leaf temple is too great. Not only are there Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques of the Buddhist sect, there are also so many relics. If Xiaohua has these things, the cultivation of the Buddhist sect will definitely skyrocket. However, although Xiaohua is greedy, he still can't bear to blacken his heart to such an extent when it comes to the painstaking efforts of others over the past 10,000 years. He uses his own false thoughts to swindle others and swindle them to pretend to be some future Buddhist lord. Go or not go? Xiaohua's heart was still wavering even when he flew above the hot spring. To go or not to go is really a difficult problem, making it hard for him to make a decision. The hot spring in front of him is several zhang in size. It is on the side of the cliff between Exquisite Leaf Temple and the foot of the mountain. The hot spring is filled with steam, melting all the snowflakes that originally fell into the hot spring into threads of water. The threads of water slowly fall down and merge into the unceasingly rolling water surface, disappearing in a moment. The water of the hot spring is azure. Between the rolling water, it is like a boiling crystal. Near the hot spring, there are many spiritual herbs, swaying under the steam of the hot spring. Further away from the hot spring, and several zhang above the hot spring, there are piles of several feet of snow. The white of the snow and the blue of the hot spring complemented each other. It looks very pleasing to the eye, like a brilliant green bead inlaid in a white jade. Wonderful! Xiaohua is vexed. Seeing such a refreshing scenery, he unconsciously claps his hands and praises. Then, looking at the clear hot spring, he really has the impulse to take a bath. Let's go and wash, perhaps my mind can calm down a bit. Xiaohua's figure descended. Standing at the edge of the hot spring, he shook his head, as if he wants to shake off the depression in his heart. Roar! At this moment, a tiger's roar suddenly came from the distant mountain path. Then a gust of wind blew, causing Xiaohua to wrinkle his brows. When he raised his eyes to look, at the foothills of the mountain about several zhang away, a white tiger of several feet in size stepped on the snow and rushed over. Wherever its four hooves passed, huge plum blossoms fell on the snow one after another. Seeing that it is just an ordinary white tiger and has not become a spirit, why would Xiaohua be afraid? He also didn't release any pressure or Buddhist sense. He only stood there and coldly watched. Who would have thought that the white tiger would fiercely rush over? Its fierce and dignified tiger eyes swept over Xiaohua. It only stared at him for a moment, then unexpectedly shook its head and wagged its tail as it walked to the other side of the hot spring. It opened its bloody mouth and swallowed several stalks of spirit grass growing on the side of the hot spring. Then, it used its claws to wipe its big mouth. Like a cat, it rolled a few times on the other side of the hot spring. Then, it stuck out its tongue and licked a dozen or so drops of congealed hot spring water on the spirit grass on the left side. Then, it actually roared a few times at Xiaohua. It cheerfully explored some kind of rhythmic pace and quickly walked away. Xiaohua, who was standing at the edge of the hot spring, was somewhat stupefied. In his eyes, these ferocious beasts, which one of them wasn't vicious? Which one of them didn't pounce on a person when they saw him? Which one of them didn't want to feast on a cultivator's blood essence? This white tiger in front of him, could it be that its nature has changed? It doesn't eat meat anymore? It doesn't want to drink blood anymore? Paradise! Paradise! Suddenly, Xiaohua was somewhat enlightened. A person's paradise naturally has no sorrows, no worries, and no worries about life and death. Although there might not be such an extreme paradise under the Buddhist sect, beasts don't eat humans, and humans don't eat meat. I'm afraid it's possible to achieve one or two. If the Buddhist sect really has such a great ability, then what can I do even if I shave? Xiaohua had heard a lot of Taoist slander about the Buddhist sect on the Xiaoyu continent and the hidden Immortal continent. He also saw the Confucian cultivators' disdain for the Buddhist sect, and even more so, he saw Frost Bamboo's cunning and Xing Chen's hypocrisy. He already had a prejudice against the Buddhist sect in his heart. Now that he suddenly saw the old monk's piety and the white tiger's obedience, he couldn't help but have doubts in his heart. He even had the thought of using other people's stones to polish jade. But when it came to the crucial moment, there was still a knot in his heart. What he wanted was the Buddhist sect's cultivation method, not the Arhat's cultivation method. But if he didn't shave, he wouldn't be able to obtain the Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques of the exquisite temple. Of course, Xiaohua could also obtain the Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques from other places, but hadn't the exquisite temple's Buddhist scriptures and secret techniques been waiting for him for 10,000 years? How could Xiaohua not feel conflicted? Xiaohua, who was struggling in his heart, took off his clothes and fell into the pool with a plop. The temperature of the pool was just right, and the depth of the pool was just right. Xiaohua, who poked his head out of the pool, let out a long sigh. A kind of comfort that came from the surface of his body slowly seeped into his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. Along with this kind of comfort, Xiaohua's soul felt like it was about to fly out. He narrowed his eyes and looked at the mist lingering in the air. Xiaohua's mind was completely blank. This blankness only lasted for a moment. Suddenly, Xiaohua's body shook. His slightly narrowed eyes suddenly opened, and a light green brilliance appeared between his eyebrows. It instantly covered his entire body, and then rushed into the pool and into the stone wall of the snowy mountain. Xiaohua's opened eyes gave birth to a kind of clarity. That clarity was like a clear mirror pouring water over Xiaohua's heart. Not only did Xiaohua's eyes seem to have torn away a thin layer of gauze, even his heart seemed to have torn away all the filth, and his heart became much brighter. What's going on? Xiaohua was greatly shocked. This Xiao's Dao foundation hasn't stabilized yet. Could it be that it's the effect of forming a nascent soul? Xiaohua, Xiaohua. While he was puzzled, a faint voice sounded in his mind. This voice was filled with joy, and even carried a trace of trembling. Hearing it, Xiaohua felt his heart tremble. Who is it? Xiaohua was stunned. If it was Little Yellow or Little Black, they wouldn't call him. Moreover, they would only talk to him in his mind after entering the space. Little White. Xiaohua even took a moment to wake up. After all, Little White almost never took the initiative to communicate with him. Today was the first time. Almost without thinking, Xiaohua hurriedly rushed his mind to the mysterious dark clouds. At this time, the mysterious dark clouds were different from before. Now, not only were the heavenly marks and earth deeds deeply engraved on the surface of the mysterious dark clouds, the green aura entwining the heavenly might had become much denser. Above this green aura, there were many golden threads. These golden threads would overflow from time to time within the green aura, flickering with the intensity of the green aura as if they were breathing. In addition, the lightning between the heavenly marks and earth deeds had also become much thicker. Those broken threads were even more connected, strand after strand. Some were dense, some were thin, but each strand seemed to have endless power. Last time, Xiaohua had already tested the powerful aura of the Great Desolate Era within these broken threads. Now that the broken threads were so complete, how could Xiaohua dare to try again? Quickly come in. Little White urged again from within the mysterious dark clouds. Xiaohua, who was standing outside of the mysterious dark clouds, could sense Little White's urgent breathing and dragon roar. Chapter 3398. Jade Archive. Xiaohua was even more surprised. If Xiaobai's soul cultivation had improved, Xiaobai would definitely not be so excited. There must be some kind of mutation in the 9th heaven of Lingyuan. When Jade Archive Xiaohua flew into the mysterious dark clouds, the lightning on the surface of the dark clouds flashed, and the broken threads also swayed. The difference was that Xiaohua deliberately avoided the aura of desolation, but it still uncontrollably attacked Jade Archive Xiaohua. Of course, Jade Archive Xiaohua did not care about these attacks at this time. His figure disappeared into the mysterious dark clouds. When he flew into the Yingshi sky, he saw that the whole Yingshi sky was brilliant. Thousands of green seal characters sometimes gathered and sometimes dissipated. When they dissipated, each green seal character was like a speck of particles. Wind, rain, thunder, and lightning swayed between these particles. When they gathered, they emitted a power that shook the earth and mountains. The huge mountains and rivers were faintly discernible, just like a boundless world. Good, Jade Archive Xiaohua could not help but praise, looking up at the sky above the Yingshi sky. Previously, Xiaobai had said that there was a seal on the upper level of the Yingshi sky, which made Xiaohua depressed for a long time. Later, Xiaobai said that he was wrong. Now, it seemed that Xiaobai must have made a new discovery. When the Jade Archive Xiaohua flew past the countless soul threads that resembled a jade green ocean, an incomparably huge dragon body was coiled in the sky above the jade green ocean. Above the jade green ocean, there was an enormous grayish-black dark cloud that was as heavy as a mountain. This dark cloud seemed to be connected to the surface of the mysterious dark cloud. There was lightning and broken threads. The only thing missing was the heavenly runes and earth deed of the heavenly might. These dark clouds were also like solidified waves. A terrifying aura was emitted from the inside. Even Jade Archive Xiaohua could not help but feel a chill. Jade Archive Xiaohua looked at the dark clouds with some surprise. This should be the fifth layer of the ninth heaven of Lingyuan, the channel formation sky. But why was this layer so different from the other four layers? Fellow Taoist, please follow me. The soul cultivator Xiaohua appeared next to the Jade Archive Xiaohua. After raising his hand in salute, he flew towards the dark clouds. Puzzled, Jade Archive Xiaohua followed soul cultivator Xiaohua into the sky. Before long, they had reached the edge of the dark cloud, where there was an enormous space. This space was gray and misty, and strands of dark green light wandered beneath soul cultivator Xiaohua's feet. Large green seal characters were constantly bursting out from within the light. Oh, this is the same as the previous fourth heaven. Jade Archive Xiaohua seemed to have understood something. He nodded and said, "Fellow Taoist, what you mean is that outside these dark clouds is the condensed meridian sky. Then what are these dark clouds?" Even as he spoke, Whitey's enormous draconic body flew over. Green light flashed around its body, and a Xiaohua that looked exactly like the soul cultivator Xiaohua appeared in front of him. "You!" Jade Archive Xiaohua was stunned. It seemed that Whitey had never transformed into his original appearance. How could it do so today? Jade Archive Xiaohua couldn't help but cry out, "How can you transform into Ai's appearance? You're a soul? Not an ordinary body." Heh. Xiaohua's smile was far more brilliant than the soul cultivator Xiaohua's. Proud and excited, he shouted, "Xiaohua!" Of course, this poor Taoist knows that. Not only are people's souls different, but it's also impossible for two identical souls to exist in this world. Furthermore, this poor Taoist isn't a human, and his soul is even more different from a human's. There's no way this poor Taoist can take on a human form that looks exactly like you. I can transform into you now. Also, look at him. Doesn't he look a little different from before? With that, Whitey pointed at soul cultivator Xiaohua. When Jade Archive Xiaohua's gaze fell on soul cultivator Xiaohua's face, soul cultivator Xiaohua's rigid face suddenly blinked at Whitey, and then the corner of his mouth slightly rose, unexpectedly smiling. Jade Archive Xiaohua was stunned. Smiling bitterly, he cupped his hands towards soul cultivator Xiaohua and said, "Congratulations, fellow Taoist. Now you're even more like I. Fellow Taoist, what kind of medicine are you selling in your gourd? Why are you still hiding it from I?" Heh. Soul cultivator Xiaohua laughed and said to Whitey, "This is all thanks to fellow Taoist. You should ask him. Hurry up and transform back." Jade Archive Xiaohua looked at Whitey, who was winking at him, and helplessly scolded, "You are you, I am me. Is it fun for you to transform into my appearance?" "Ah, yes, it's fun." Little white Xiaohua laughed heartily. He pulled Jade Archive Xiaohua's hand and said, "Come with me, I'll show you something interesting." After transforming into Xiaohua, Whitey's personality seemed to have changed. He was much more quick-witted than before, which made Jade Archive Xiaohua quite happy. The three identical Xiaohus flew over the mountain like dark clouds and arrived at a very ordinary place. Whitey smiled and said, "Xiaohua, take a look. What's different about this place?" Jade Archive Xiaohua looked left and right, but couldn't see anything different. Shaking his head, he said, "I can't see anything different." "Ha, I knew it. He definitely can't see it." Whitey laughed and clapped his hands, looking at Soul Cultivator Xiaohua. Soul Cultivator Xiaohua said unhappily, "If I can't see it, he can't see it either." Soul Cultivator Xiaohua opened his mouth, and a strand of soul flew out of his mouth. Whoosh! A dark green light flashed, and a dozen or so strands of soul came out of the dark cloud. "Xiaohua, come with this poor Taoist and take a look." Whitey rushed over and landed right in the middle of the soul strands. Its entire body once again transformed into its dragon form. As soon as the soul strands were retracted, Whitey immediately disappeared into the dark clouds. The lightning and the broken strands did not stop it. Jade Archive Xiaohua looked at Soul Cultivator Xiaohua and asked, "Can it be that we can only enter through these soul threads? Are the other places the same?" Soul Cultivator Xiaohua nodded. "That's right. Whitey has been hovering under the dark clouds for many days, and only then did he discover the secret inside. You'll know everything once you enter." "Okay." Jade Archive Xiaohua didn't ask any more questions. His body floated up and landed in the middle of the soul threads. The soul threads were like antennae, and Jade Archive Xiaohua immediately entered the dark clouds. The surface of the dark clouds was the same as the layers of the 9 heavens of spirit origin. They were all made of soul threads, but the soul threads here were somewhat black and mixed with lightning. When Jade Archive Xiaohua passed through the surface of the dark clouds, his vision turned dark. This place was different from the 9 heavens of spirit origin. However, when Jade Archive Xiaohua looked up again, there was a faint light of the moon and stars in the darkness. Borrowing this light, Jade Archive Xiaohua saw that this was a curved space. "Xiaohua, come up." Whitey's voice came from the top of the space. Jade Archive Xiaohua obeyed and flew up. It was very strange. This space was different from the 9 heavens of spirit origin. One didn't need to rely on the depth of a soul cultivator to fly high. Moreover, as Xiaohua flew higher, the space around him became bigger and bigger. After flying for a while, Jade Archive Xiaohua still couldn't see Whitey's figure. However, waves of coldness inexplicably emerged from the surroundings. This coldness was like a cold wind blowing on Jade Archive Xiaohua's body, making his muscles and bones weak. Moreover, after flying for a while, Jade Archive Xiaohua felt even more limp and numb, making Jade Archive Xiaohua feel very uneasy. "How is it?" Whitey's dragon body appeared about 10 zhang above Xiaohua's head. "Do you feel like you're going to be blown away?" "Indeed." Jade Archive Xiaohua didn't hide it. "If I fly any higher, I won't be able to bear it. Look at that place again." Soul Cultivator Xiaohua also flew up and pointed his finger at a distant place. In the night sky, which looked like the mouth of a well, there were 2 faint green lights. One was like a half moon, the other half was blocked by the edge of the night sky, and the other half was a complete star shape. Spirit, looking at the moon shape in the distance, Jade Archive Xiaohua felt something and nodded. "This is the green seal character, Spirit." "That's also the green seal character, Spirit." Soul Cultivator Xiaohua didn't find it strange. He pointed at the green seal character that looked like a star and said, "This should also be one of the 9 heavens of spirit origin, but I don't know why it's so strange." "It's more than strange." Whitey hurriedly said, "It's simply strange." "All right, Xiaohua, do you remember when I told you that your meridian condensing heaven might be sealed?" "And I naturally remember." Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. "At that time, I had a feeling of oppression, an intuition that I couldn't break through the barrier between the 2 heavens. But I could. I tested it a little with him and found that although there was an extremely oppressive feeling, the barrier between the two heavens could still be broken through. That's why I told you that I was wrong. Indeed. Jade Archive Xiaohua seemed to have understood what Whitey wanted to say and nodded with a smile. But when I followed him to the meridian condensing heaven, there was this dark cloud above our heads. All the oppressive, dense, and sealed feeling from before came from this dark cloud. Whitey explained again, I stayed here with him for a long time, but I couldn't find the secret inside. Therefore, he went to cultivate and comprehend the bone joints, and I searched here. I don't believe that there's something in this world that I don't know. Whitey's I was extremely similar to Xiaohua's. Jade Archive Xiaohua almost laughed out loud. But I searched for a long time, but I couldn't find it. But just a few days ago, the entire dark cloud suddenly boiled and swelled, and an extremely bright light of the stars and the moon came from the place where we came in. Little White said proudly, as such, I hurriedly flew over and found that there was a crack there. Just as I arrived, the crack started to shrink, and by the time he arrived, the crack had already disappeared, and not a single hole could be seen. Fortunately, he could use the soul strands to guide the soul strands out, and when I touched those soul strands, my whole body immediately shrank and was pulled in. After I came in and was illuminated by the light of the stars and the moon, I could transform into your appearance. Chapter 3399. I can also smile now. Soul Cultivator Xiaohua also said with a smile. Jade Archive Xiaohua frowned as he listened, then looked up at the two spirit characters in the sky. He seemed to have thought of something and said in a low voice, previously, I remembered that there was a saying of 3 spiritual souls and 7 physical souls in this world, but when it comes to soul cultivators, there are only 3 spiritual souls and 6 physical souls left. The 9 heavens of spirit origin has 9 layers, and this layer is probably the hidden layer, right? There are 2 spirit characters in this layer of heaven, which should be the 2 characters of Yin and Yang. It should be called the Yin-Yang spirit sky. This layer of heaven has stars all over the sky, so it's also very good to call it Star Splendor Heaven. Soul Cultivator Xiaohua suggested again. Jade Archive Xiaohua didn't care about the name of this layer of heaven, but he asked curiously, however, within the 6 heavens of spirit soul, there are 50 green seal characters in each layer. Why is there only 1 in this layer of heaven? Could it be that this is one of the 12 missing green seal characters? Soul Cultivator Xiaohua also frowned. I'm afraid so. Jade Archive Xiaohua nodded. This spirit character is not simple. When Little White arrived here, he could use his spirit to transform into a spirit soul, and fellow Taoist also has a spirit. As for I, just now, I also felt as if I was enlightened. The reason why my human race is the spirit of all living things is probably because of this double spirit sky, right? Extremely so. Soul Cultivator Xiaohua said with a smile. Others who cultivate the 9 heavens of spirit origin can't see the situation of each layer of heaven, so they naturally can't sense this star splendor heaven. As for our opportunity, Little White really found this place based on his feelings. That's right, it's an opportunity. Jade Archive Xiaohua sighed. The vibration just now was probably because I advanced to the nascent soul stage and caused a phenomenon in the sky. This double spirit sky had its own changes, so Little White discovered something strange, right? This is Xiaohua's opportunity, and also the opportunity of all fellow Taoists. At the same time, it's also I's opportunity. Little White said with a smile, when I flew in, there was a lot of heaven and earth spirit energy, abnormally abundant. Moreover, the starlight in this heaven and earth spirit energy was very bright, flashing like fluctuations. Jade Archive Xiaohua smiled and said, I formed the nascent soul in my lower dantian and attracted the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. The double spirit sky should be able to sense it. However, the soul cultivator Xiaohua said, that day in the void, there were only fluctuations. It was more like the fluctuations attracted the star power, which was why the heaven and earth spirit energy was produced in Star Splendor Heaven, right? Left and right are the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. One of you is called the first stage of the spirit heaven, and the other is called the star splendor heaven. Don't you think it's boring? However, I feel that this place is different from the other heavens. Little White was disdainful of the disagreement between the two and grinned. The bottom of this place is extremely narrow, almost inaudible, and the top is extremely wide, like a tree root deeply rooted in the ground. How can you still call it heaven? Hearing this, Jade Archive Xiaohua thought about the Bodhi tree next to the exquisite temple. Wasn't it made up of many branches twisted together? And how many roots had penetrated into the foothills? Thinking of this, Jade Archive Xiaohua suddenly had a flash of inspiration and said with a smile, "If that's the case, why don't we call it spiritual root?" "No, it's too vulgar. It doesn't sound as good as star splendor heaven." Soul cultivator Xiaohua immediately objected. "Besides, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth here is much more than spiritual light. If you want to call it spiritual root, you have to call it spiritual root." Io, hearing Soul cultivator Xiaohua mention the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, Jade Archive Xiaohua suddenly became happy again. He clapped his hands and said, "What fellow Taoist said is right. Just as I advanced to the nascent soul stage, there was spiritual energy of heaven and earth here. In other words, I can rely on whether or not this place can sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and then judge whether or not others can sense the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and then judge whether or not they can cultivate my Tao sex cultivation method. Fellow Taoist, if this place isn't called spiritual root, then what is it called?" "Forget it, do as you wish." Soul cultivator Xiaohua couldn't stand Jade Archive Xiaohua said, "You have the final say. If you call it spiritual root, then it is spiritual root. If you call it spiritual aura heaven, then it is spiritual aura heaven. If you say you can judge whether or not a cultivator can cultivate, then you can judge whether or not others can cultivate. It has nothing to do with I." "Don't." Jade Archive Xiaohua pulled Soul cultivator Xiaohua and said, "How does it have nothing to do with you? I am Xiaohua, and you are also Xiaohua. With me, Xiaohua, in this world, who dares to bully and humiliate the Tao sect. You also have a part of the responsibility here. How about this? You carefully think about whether or not you can find a cultivation method to judge whether or not a mortal spiritual root can sense the spiritual aura of heaven and earth. How about it?" "I hear." Soul cultivator Xiaohua was about to refuse, but looking at Jade Archive Xiaohua's smile that wasn't a smile, he said very dejectedly, "All right, since I's soul bridge and that green seal text called cleansing heaven and washing earth have already been practiced, I will help you take a look." "Many thanks, fellow Taoist." Xiaohua bowed and said, "When I's nascent soul is formed, I will ask fellow Taoist to go out for a walk." This is what fellow Taoist said. "I want to be the first to go out and take a look." Soul cultivator Xiaohua unexpectedly laughed like a little fox. Jade Archive Xiaohua suddenly had a feeling that he had fallen into a trap. Jade Archive Xiaohua pretended to snort coldly. "How effective is that green seal text of cleansing heaven and washing earth? I will let fellow Taoist know." Soul cultivator Xiaohua said with a smile, "This green seal text is like lightning, thunder, clouds, and rain. It is precisely used to break all the talismans of soul cultivators in the world. If you practice it to a profound level, any kind of imprisonment, any kind of seal can be broken." "Good." Jade Archive Xiaohua's face had a slight smile, and he said again, "Actually, the discovery of spiritual roots doesn't mean anything to you and me, but it has a great impact on the development of the world's Tao. Now that the spiritual aura of heaven and earth has changed greatly in the Dawn Rain continent, all the Tao of disciple selection is ineffective. If we can rely on this spiritual root to select a disciple, you and I will have done a great deed." "Yes, I understand." Soul cultivator Xiaohua seemed to have sensed Jade Archive Xiaohua's displeasure, and he hurriedly said with a smile, "Right now, we are only at the spiritual root, so what do the tree trunks, branches, and leaves look like?" While Jade Archive Xiaohua and Soul Cultivator Xiaohua were talking, Little White was not interested. It just raised its head to look at the starry sky, looking at the two spirit characters, and muttered to itself, "I really want to fly up and take a look." "Little White," Jade Archive Xiaohua said with a smile, "since the spirit character is an incomplete green seal text, it must be hidden in a dangerous place. Right now, our cultivation is limited, and it is not enough to get close to the green seal text. In the future, when our cultivation deepens, we will definitely be able to go and take a look one day." Alas! Unexpectedly, Jade Archive Xiaohua's comforting words did not make Little White smile, but instead made it sigh. "I actually envy you humans. Just the soul alone contains such a great mystery. I really don't know how you humans obtain the favor of heaven and earth. And my soul doesn't seem to have such a mystery." Little White's sigh naturally made Jade Archive Xiaohua think of the debate he had with Ao Shuai and old monster Zhifeng about who was the wisest of all living things. Whether it is a human, a demon, or even a spiritual flower or spiritual grass, they are all the heavenly bell. They all have their own value of existence, and each has its own strengths and weaknesses. Everyone is a spiritual object of heaven and earth, so why should we care about who is the wisest of all living things? Jade Archive Xiaohua could only put it this way. Little White was not like old monster Zhifeng, so Xiaohua could only compromise. Unexpectedly, Little White shook its head slightly and whispered, "Xiaohua, you are still wrong." "I am wrong?" Jade Archive Xiaohua stared blankly, somewhat unable to understand Little White's words. "Where did I go wrong?" Little White shook its head again and said, "I only envy the souls of the human race, envy that the human race has the heavenly bell. But this kind of envy is only envy, and it is limited to the soul. Compared to my demon race, the difference between the human race and my demon race is not just a little bit. To be honest, in my eyes, the human race can only rely on their spirituality to compete with my demon race. Everything else is useless." Sweat, Jade Archive Xiaohua did not expect Little White to be as arrogant as old monster Zhifeng and Ao Shuai. Its tone just now was just jealousy, not envy. He could not help but smile bitterly. "My human race, are you still a human?" Little White did not wait for Jade Archive Xiaohua to finish speaking, and asked with a smile. Jade Archive Xiaohua smiled even more bitterly. Last time when they surrounded the fire dragon's soul essence, Little White already knew too many of his secrets. If he really forced himself to say it, he really could not be considered a complete human. Actually, the most terrifying thing about the human race is their ability to reproduce. Little White looked at Jade Archive Xiaohua, knowing that he had nothing to say, and continued, "In my memory, when I first arrived at Yellow Flower Ridge, there were not many people nearby, but what happened later? Although the population of Yellow Flower Ridge had withered, how many people from the secular world would appear within 1,000 li radius? In my demon race. Ouch, I seem to remember something." At this point, Little White's face changed slightly, and suddenly turned into a huge dragon rolling in the spiritual root, no longer paying attention to Jade Archive Xiaohua. "Fellow Taoist, there seems to be an old monk peeping at your bath outside." Soul Cultivator Xiaohua reminded with a smile, "You'd better go out quickly, don't let your spring scenery be exposed." Alas, Jade Archive Xiaohua ignored Soul Cultivator Xiaohua's laughter and sighed, "You should know the cause of this matter. This old monk wants I to shave my head and become a monk. Although his tantra does not prohibit meat and fish and marriage, I am still a Taoist disciple. How can I become a monk at will? Future Buddha. Just listen to it, it's very arrogant." Soul Cultivator Xiaohua instigated, "Why don't we play with future Buddha's orthodoxy? Fellow Taoist, you now have so many fellow Taoists." Ouch, that's right. The Jade Archive Xiaohua understood that Soul Cultivator Xiaohua's thoughts were exactly what he was thinking. However, because he was thinking too much, he didn't think of these details. This poor Taoist doesn't need to shave his head, but the Buddha's Saraira can shave it. That guy originally practiced Buddhism, he should be willing to shave his head, right? Farewell, fellow Taoist. Jade Archive Xiaohua cupped his hands and retreated from the mysterious dark clouds. In front of him was the steaming hot spring in the snow. Xiaohua was hesitating whether to escape or not, But he found the mystery of the spiritual root in the mysterious dark clouds, which delayed him. Now that the old monk of exquisite temple chased after him, how could he still have the face to escape? However, with the Buddha's Saraira as a scapegoat, Xiaohua did not mind becoming a monk once. Chapter 3400. Looking at the old monk who was holding a strange yellow monk robe, Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. Just now, he had been talking nonsense with Little White about the spirits of all living things. In fact, as a human, the most difficult thing for a demon to reach was the human heart. Only with a heart could one be benevolent, righteous, and virtuous. Only then could one have no regrets for one's faith. This kind of human nature was something that demons would never understand. From the exquisite temple to this pool, Xiaohua only needed to fly. However, Xiaohua also knew that along the way, not to mention the slippery snow and rugged mountain roads, even with the old monk's turbid eyes, it was already extremely difficult for him to reach this pool from the exquisite temple. Not to mention, the old monk's clothes were already covered in snow. Xiaohua didn't know how long he had been standing here. However, the old monk's arms were very calm as he held the robe. The yellow hat was placed on top of the robe, and a string of prayer beads was placed beside the hat. His eyes were calmly looking forward. They had already passed through the water vapor and landed outside the cliff. From those turbid eyes, Xiaohua could see the old monk's conviction and persistence. Although Xiaohua didn't say anything, he believed that Xiaohua was bathing in the pool. Facing such a heavy trust, Xiaohua felt a rare kind of nervousness. It was as if this was a kind of responsibility. This responsibility made Xiaohua feel even more restrained and uneasy than when he faced the strange insect in the void. "Elder, please wait a moment. I will come up right away." Xiaohua muttered to himself for a moment. He used his hand to lift up the hot water in the pool and symbolically washed his body a few times. "Buddhist Lord, don't be anxious." A smile flashed across the old monk's extremely old face. He said, "Carefully bathing and washing away the dust in the body is also cleansing the mind. Using a pure mind is the foundation of Buddhism. Buddhist Lord spent so much effort and didn't slack off in the slightest. This is truly worthy of this poor monk's admiration." Sweat. A trace of shame appeared in Xiaohua's heart. He originally wanted to get up, but now he could only be patient and properly wash his body. Although he didn't wash away any dirt, Xiaohua felt that it was a blasphemy to the old monk's lofty faith. Looking at the monk robe in the old monk's hand, Xiaohua waved his hand and the yellow monk robe flew into the air. After casually putting it on, it landed beside the old monk. "This poor monk will help Buddha Lord change his clothes." The old monk felt the clothes in his hands fly away. After a while, he finally opened his mouth. Xiaohua wanted to put on his own clothes, but this monk robe was different from a Taoist robe. It was even different from the monk robes Xiaohua had seen before. It was very strange, so he didn't put on any pretense. He smiled and said, "Thank you, elder." When the old monk heard this, he beamed with joy. He looked at Xiaohua with his eyes closed, and his hands trembled as he helped Xiaohua put on his clothes. After half a meal's worth of time, Xiaohua finally put on the monk's robe. When one of his arms came out of the monk's robe, Xiaohua let out a long sigh of relief. He looked at the old monk who had also changed into a new monk's robe and asked, "Elder, you don't have to wear this monk's robe every day, right?" "Buddha Lord, don't worry. This is the Buddha Lord's formal robe. It can only be worn during my tantric sect's major celebrations. There's no need to wear it on ordinary days." The old monk smiled and said, "Moreover, my Shaolin Long Temple's lineage has always been small. When this poor monk passes away, there will only be one Buddha Lord. The Buddha Lord's status is honorable. Other than the current Buddha Lord, who else can stand shoulder to shoulder with the Buddha Lord in the past? If the Buddha Lord wants to wear it, he can wear it. No one can stop him. Hee, that's really free and unfettered." Xiaohua smiled. The old monk proudly said, "Of course, my tantric sect has always been an anomaly in the Buddhist sect. In the eyes of others, it is full of mystery." "I understand." Xiaohua smiled. It was funny but also a bit bitter. Just now, when the old monk was changing his clothes, he used his spiritual sense and true qi to check the old monk's meridians and body. He even used the devil realms technique to check his blood vessels. Just as the old monk said, the old monk was really at the end of his life. His meridians had long withered, the essence of his body was also dried up. His heart and blood vessels were abnormally old. Everything he did now was based on a kind of belief. The scene of the old monk lying on the ground was definitely not a coincidence. Facing such a body, even Xiaohua's rejuvenation pill was powerless to bring him back to life. Alas, there is a limit to one's strength. It is indeed so. Perhaps only an immortal or a true Buddha Lord can let this old man live until tomorrow. Xiaohua sighed. Buddha Lord, please. This poor monk can finally shave the Buddha Lord's head. The old monk put his palms together and bowed in a very gratified manner. This is the most glorious moment of this poor monk's life. It is also the moment this poor monk has looked forward to for a lifetime. Thank you for your trouble, elder. Xiaohua used his monk robe to wrap the old monk. The two of them slowly flew up and flew towards Shaolin Long Temple. Although Xiaohua was afraid that the old monk would not be able to take it and flew extremely slowly, he still landed in front of Shaolin Long Temple's main hall in a moment. Although the old monk could not see clearly, when his feet touched the ground, he felt the familiarity of the surroundings. He was not surprised and said with a smile, although Buddha Lord has not shaved his head, he actually has such divine ability. It is truly the fortune of my Tantric Buddhism sect. I do not dare. They are all insignificant Taoists. Compared to elders' cultivation, they are far inferior. Xiaohua did not dare to be too arrogant in front of an old man like Dao Shan. He replied humbly, "This poor monk's cultivation has just begun. It cannot be compared to Buddha Lord who has already cultivated for several lifetimes. Even if Buddha Lord is a senior cultivator in this life and does not understand Buddhism, as long as he enters my Buddhism sect, he will be able to find the good karma of that day. All Buddhism sect's cultivation can be traced." The old monk's seemingly careless words immediately made Xiaohua feel greatly alarmed in his heart. That's right. Buddhism sect emphasizes reincarnation and cultivation. This hidden immortal continent. This Xiao feels so familiar. Although I have not found Lu Zhen yet, I have not found Piaomiao sect, but perhaps it is this Xiao's experience from my previous life. Xiaohua's thoughts turned rapidly. Could it be that this Xiao is really? Alas, there is always only one truth in this world. Although Xiaohua is already a nascent soul master, he is still so insignificant under the heavenly Tao. He wants to find his own origin from the confusing world of the human world. All kinds of traces, 1,000 layers of fog, always make him unable to find the way back on the wrong path. I know. The old monk raised his hand and pushed open the door of the main hall. He did not ask about Xiaohua's cultivation. He did not even care if Xiaohua was a Confucian cultivator or a Taoist cultivator. Perhaps he already regarded Xiaohua as a lay disciple of Buddhism sect. Buddha Lord, please. The old monk pushed open the door. He did not dare to take half a step forward and said very respectfully. Xiaohua was also not polite and stepped into the main hall. However, he was also somewhat nervous in his heart. He did not know what was inside this main hall. Xiaohua naturally did not enter the main hall of Buddhism sect. However, he saw many Buddhist shrines and Buddha statues in the ruins of Buddhism sect. Even in his memory, there was once a golden statue of Buddha. However, this Shaolin Long Temple was a branch of Tantric Buddhism. Moreover, it was built 10,000 years ago to wait for him, the so-called future Buddha Lord. How could Xiaohua not be curious? The whole main hall was empty, but it was also abnormally clean. Xiaohua raised his eyes and saw a 10-feet golden body. This golden body was abnormally fat, with a bare chest and a very warm smile on its face. What was special was that on both sides of its belly, which was bigger than 10 months of pregnancy, in its left hand was a small bag, and in its right hand was a thick prayer bead. Moreover, this golden body was casually lying there. It was not standing like an ordinary golden body of Buddha Lord. It was also not like when Xiaohua first formed Buddha's Sarira with one hand pointing to the sky and the other pointing to the earth. This is the future Buddha Lord. Xiaohua saw that the golden body of Buddha inside was not too different from what he had imagined. It was the same as what he had seen in the ruins of Buddhism sect. Unconsciously, his heart was slightly calmed, a kind of inexplicable calmness. In front of the golden body of Buddha, there was only an ordinary incense table. On it, 2 thick red candles were lit. In the middle of the red candles, there was a small fist-sized incense burner. On the incense burner, there were 9 red incense sticks, each as thick as a thumb. The incense burner was not big, so the 9 incense sticks had already completely filled the incense burner. At this time, it should be because the old monk had waited for Xiaohua for too long, the incense sticks had almost burned to the end. In front of the incense table, there were 2 ordinary praying mats. Although they were somewhat old, one of them was particularly worn out. Before the praying mat, there was no Buddhist weapon such as a wooden fish. There was only a small box, half of which was covered by a bright yellow silk. When Xiaohua stopped to look, the old monk had already shakily walked to the praying mat. He knelt on the praying mat, kowtowed, and recited, Namo Maitreya Buddha, disciple kowtows to Buddha. Disciple has waited under the green lamp for nearly 100 years. Now, I finally welcome Buddha Lord's flesh in this life. Disciple is fortunate to be able to shave Buddha Lord's flesh today. May Buddha Lord send down the auspiciousness of 100,000 worlds to bless Buddha Lord's flesh. Disciple is willing to use my broken body to help Buddha Lord cross the tribulation in this life. Immediately, the old monk respectfully kowtowed 9 times with his head on the ground. His mouth was also chanting, and at this time, Xiaohua was once again bewildered. After a full half cup of tea's time, the 9 incense sticks finally burned to the end. The old monk raised his head, put his palms together and said, Namo Maitreya Buddha. Then he lifted his hand and lifted the silk covering the small box. When he opened the box, there was a bronze mirror and a simple razor inside. The old monk invited the razor out with both hands. He turned around and coughed, Bodhi, I am holding the blade for Buddha Lord today. Are you willing to abandon everything in the secular world and enter my Buddhist sect? Elder. Xiaohua walked to the front. He didn't want to hide anything and said, although I cultivate Buddhist sect's exquisite leaf sutra, I was already a Tao sect disciple before practicing Buddhist sect's cultivation method. Moreover, my cultivation method is very complicated. If I say it, Elder may not believe me. Today, I came from hidden Immortal continent, but I want to find a senior monk who knows the method of nirvana. I really came to Shaolin Long Temple to ask for directions. I didn't expect there to be so many surprises waiting for me here. Elder, let me shave my head and respect me as the future Buddha Lord, can accept it. But this shave matter, just now when I was bathing I already thought it through. I have already cultivated Buddha's Sarira. Elder, can you let this Buddha's Sarira replace me to shave my head and become a monk? Chapter 3401. Exquisite Leaf Scripture? When the old monk heard this, he couldn't help but be startled. The razor in his hand trembled even more. A series of words came out of his mouth that Xiaohua didn't understand, the same tone as when he was praying. Xiaohua smiled bitterly, Elder, I came from the hidden Immortal continent, so I don't understand the language of the Pure Land world. Elder, if you have anything to say, please speak slowly. Namo Maitreya Buddha. The old monk let out a long breath and respectfully asked, This poor monk is really overjoyed. I lost my calm for a moment and let Buddha Lord laugh at me. Although my exquisite leaf temple is waiting for the arrival of the Buddha Lord, and at the same time, we also prepared all the Buddhist scriptures and Buddhist secret techniques for the Buddha Lord, and even offered sariras as offerings, but the exquisite leaf scripture that the Buddha Lord cultivates is not included. The name of this Buddhist scripture is not even recorded in the Buddhist scriptures of the Pure Land world. It is only passed down by word of mouth in my exquisite leaf temple. The Buddha Lord has 9 lifetimes of fate to be able to practice this Buddhist scripture, So naturally, he is indeed the Buddha Lord that my exquisite leaf temple is waiting for. The old monk paused for a moment and took a deep breath as if he was calming himself down. Then he said, Buddha Lord, you have such an opportunity to cultivate Buddha's Saraira before shaving your head. But how can a Saraira shave your head? What? Buddha Sarairas? Until now, the old monk was shocked as if he had just woken up from a dream. His shriveled lips trembled violently, and he could no longer hold the razor in his hand. He loosened his grip, and the razor fell to the ground. Xiaohua raised his hand, and the razor floated up, flying back to the old monk's hand. Then, a string of words that Xiaohua couldn't understand came out of the old monk's mouth. While speaking, the old monk knelt on the praying mat and kowtowed several times. Looking at the old monk's ecstatic appearance, Xiaohua's heart was both proud and happy. He was willing to bring hope to the old man, no matter how big or small. Seeing that the incense on the incense table was about to go out, Xiaohua hurriedly reminded, Elder, the 9 incense sticks in front of the Buddha are about to go out. It's fine. The old monk said in a relaxed manner, I was worried before the hot spring. I was even prepared to shave Lord Buddha's head before the candles went out. But now I have to shave Buddha's Saraira. Such earthly incense is no longer worthy. Let it burn out slowly. This is all Buddha's arrangement. As if he was afraid that Xiaohua didn't understand, the old monk explained, the razors of the secular world, the incense sticks of the secular world, they are all used to shave the body of a mortal. To shave the body of a true Buddha's Saraira, that is something that only the eminent monks who have saved the Buddha's fruit, and even our Buddha has the qualifications to do. The incense sticks are definitely the colored glaze fragrant oil of our Buddha's thunderclap temple, and the razors are also the severing mundane silk of our Buddha's thunderclap temple. Alas, this is all recorded in the Buddhist sect's ancient books. How many people are able to cultivate Buddha's Saraira? Since he had cultivated the Buddha's Saraira, how could he not have shaved his head? Compared to shaving one's body, shaving one's head for a Buddha's Saraira surpasses how much? Lord Buddha has already abandoned his body before entering our Buddhist sect. This is truly worthy of celebration. Hearing this, Xiaohua really didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He was just being lazy and avoiding it, but it actually coincided with some of the Buddhist sect's secrets. He rubbed his nose. Disciple represents my Xiaolinglong temple to thank Lord Buddha for the gift. The old monk was overjoyed, trembling with joy. Originally, disciple wanted to tell Lord Buddha clearly after Lord Buddha's head shave. Now that Lord Buddha has already refined Buddha's Saraira, Lord Buddha only needs to use the Saraira in the Buddha's head hall of my Xiaolinglong temple. That will be the glory of my Xiaolinglong temple. What? Xiaohua was shocked, almost inconceivably saying, Refining your Saraira is a gift to you? Is this the glory you've been waiting for? That's right. It's exactly so. Lord Buddha only needs to integrate these Saraira into Lord Buddha's Saraira. That will be the greatest gift to us. The old monk was very sure. After disciple shave Lord Buddha's head, disciple will go to the west. Lord Buddha, please cremate disciple's remains and use the Saraira inside. Disciple can wait for Lord Buddha in this life, help Lord Buddha shave Lord Buddha's head, and then integrate the Saraira with Lord Buddha's Saraira. Lord Buddha's light will be able to refine disciple's karma. Disciple will definitely be able to achieve Buddha's fruit with a karmic and unobstructed heart after reincarnation. So that's how it is. Xiaohua somewhat understood, but he still hesitated. This seat has never read Buddhist scriptures. Previously, I have also seen the cultivation method of the great strength Vajra Dharma body. It is a selfish act of swallowing other people's Saraira to strengthen oneself. Could it be that this seat's Buddha's Saraira is different from this cruel cultivation method? Naturally, there is an essential difference. The old monk smiled and explained, Lord Buddha only needs to look at the Buddhist scriptures at the side of the main hall to know the specifics. The great strength Vajra Dharma body is to cultivate the position of our Buddhist protector. It only borrows the power of the Saraira and does not eliminate the karma of the Saraira. Disciple doesn't know how much Lord Buddha knows about our Buddhist sect's Buddha fruits. Jialon, Venerable Heavenly King, Vajra, Arhat, Bodhisattva, and Buddha, these 7 kinds of Buddha fruits, except for Bodhisattva and Buddha, which can eliminate the Sarira karma and use the supreme power of Buddha's light to help people cultivate in the next life. The other 5 kinds of Buddha fruits can only borrow power like the great strength Vajra Dharma fruit. Not necessarily. Xiao Hua's suspicion immediately arose again. He couldn't help but secretly criticize. Sarira can help the cultivation of the golden body. This is known by all Buddhist experts. How many senior monks can cultivate Bodhisattva and Buddha? How many people can know the effect of this Sarira? Eliminating the Sarira karma and helping people cultivate in the next life. It may not be their words to scare people. However, seeing that this old monk was so pious, Xiaohua didn't dare to say these words, especially to provoke him. Of course, Xiaohua was only suspicious. He didn't study Buddhism and didn't have the secret technique to eliminate the Sarira karma. The Buddhist sect is a cultivation path that is on par with the Taoist sect. Who can say that they don't have this kind of magical power to help people cultivate in the next life? While speaking, the old monk's figure swayed twice, as if he couldn't stand steadily. Elder. Xiaohua hurriedly supported the old monk and called out. Disciple doesn't have much time left in the mortal world. Lord Buddha, please take pity on disciple and let disciple have the honor of shaving Lord Buddha's Sarira into my tantra. The old monk hurriedly waved his hand, somewhat out of breath. Good. Seeing this, Xiaohua knew that this was already the old monk's last wish. He also didn't dare to be negligent. He patted his forehead, and the Sarira came out of his Naiwan palace. When the 4 qi-long golden body held the clear water bottle and dressed in the 10,000 Buddha painting stepped into the air, Amitabha Buddha, good, he chanted the name of Buddha, his face solemn and benevolent. Rumble! The heaven and earth shook, and the wind and clouds changed color. Where the wind and clouds swayed, a fierce wind rose. Wherever the fierce wind passed, the snow that filled the sky was blown into the sky, and the layers of dark clouds in the sky were cut down layer by layer in this fierce wind. The wind grew stronger and stronger, and it was as if there were small holes in the air for thousands of miles around. The seemingly endless power of faith poured out from these small holes, like a waterfall falling from the sky. Tens of thousands of streams surged and fell toward the inconspicuous little Linglong temple of the great snow mountain. The old monk was shocked again, because as the power of faith fell from the sky, heavenly flowers covered the entire snowy mountain. Fairies wearing flawless heavenly clothes sat cross-legged on the exquisite temple, either playing the pipa or softly singing. The sound of nature filled the entire main hall. One after another, powerful sky dragons roared and swam around the mini-exquisite temple. The effect of Nanwu Guanxian Bodhisattva in the longevity town was too shocking. Under the influence of the Buddhist sect's disciples, the worship of Guanxian spread uncontrollably throughout the entire hidden immortal continent. This pure power of faith should have slowly poured into Xiaohua's Buddha relic, but because of the innate divine restriction, this power of faith was not collected by Xiaohua in time and had already condensed to a very terrifying degree. Now that the Buddha relic suddenly appeared in the Pure Land world, the power of faith naturally gathered together, and its momentum was naturally extraordinary, causing even more strange phenomena. Previously, when Xiaohua took out the Buddha relic in the Black Cloud Ridge, the situation appeared like this. But fortunately, this was the Pure Land world, the Buddhist sect's mainland. Wherever the Buddha's light shone, there were many people who achieved the Buddha fruit, and this power of faith was indeed very eye-catching. The monks either knelt down to express their thanks, or rang the bell to celebrate, and no one came to disturb them. Chapter 3402. Wu. Similar to the spirit tide, the power of faith gathered to a certain extent and immediately turned into threads of crystal-like objects. These threads of crystal-like light flashed and fell into Xiaohua's Buddha Sarira. Every time a thread of crystal-like light flashed, the Buddha Sarira would slightly tremble. Moreover, as the crystal-like threads fell, the Buddha Sarira's body flickered with golden light and actually broke through the 4 feet restriction. It gradually increased in height until it reached 5 feet before stopping. The strange thing was that as the Buddha Sarira increased in height, the figures of the dancing fairies and roaring dragons from before actually gradually became blurry. When the Buddha's golden body reached 5 feet, it actually disappeared. Only the heavenly flowers were still fluttering around the snowy mountain. At this time, the strange phenomenon within the 10 million li radius had already converged to a 100 li radius. The dark clouds and snowflakes in the sky had all disappeared, revealing a bright sun. Perhaps because the snowy mountain was high enough, or perhaps because the sky here was pure enough, the sun was very dazzling. Under the sun, the pure crystal-like threads of crystal-like silver light swayed and fell like swimming fish. Wherever the crystal-like threads passed, gusts of wind were also produced. The sound of the wind never stopped, as if the world was singing. This disciple is very lucky. The old monk's eyes seemed to also brighten. He trembled as he walked in front of the Buddha Sarira and bowed to the sky. This disciple really didn't expect Buddha Lord's Buddha Sarira to already have a 5 feet golden body. Buddha Lord's enlightenment in this life will definitely come true. To be able to shave Buddha Lord's head and lead Buddha Lord into our Buddhist sect, this disciple is truly fortunate. Amitabha. The Buddha Sarira chanted. Although its appearance was exactly the same as Xiaohua's, the benevolence and compassion on its face was not something Xiaohua could have. The golden body of the Buddha Sarira descended and stood right in front of the old monk. The old monk extended his trembling right hand and landed on the top of the Buddha Sarira's head. He chanted, "People say that there are 3,000 worries, all of them are born from the heart and from the head. Cut off worries and let go of worries. Entering our Buddhist sect is joy. The body is an external object. Only the body can enter the mortal world. The mortal world is like the sea, the body is the boat, the Buddha's heart is the helm, kindness is the shore, cut off your worries and enter the sea of bitterness." Amitabha. As the old monk chanted, his hand landed on the top of the Buddha Sarira's head. Boom! With a loud sound, the Buddha Sarira's golden light brightened the old monk's turbid eyes. He seemed to see the golden body of the Buddha Sarira. At the moment when the old monk's hand was about to leave the Sarira's head, his middle finger slightly trembled as if it twitched, wanting to touch the top of the golden body again. Amitabha, Amitabha. Suddenly, the sound of Buddha chants resounded throughout the entire main hall of the little exquisite temple. The old monk's hand gently moved away from the top of the Buddha Sarira's head. He turned his head with difficulty and saw that behind the incense table, the golden body of the Maitreya Buddha was also shining brightly. The sound of chanting was coming from within the golden body. This golden light was like a sword and the chanting was like a bell. When it landed on the main hall, waves of blood-curdling screams rose one after another. At the same time, strands of black shadows also emerged from the left side. Within the shadows, the intertwining of the fairies and rakshasas were all destroyed by the golden light and the chanting. The old monk covered his chest with one hand. A black shadow also flew out from his body, turning into a black fog and disappearing in midair. The old monk's body fell to the ground of the main hall again, motionless. Amitabha. Xiaohua was shocked at first, but then he had some understanding. He had experienced Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva's enlightenment in the Longevity Town. He knew that the old monk was naturally still the old monk, but when he revealed the golden body of the Buddha Sarira, he had already attracted the heavenly demon. The old monk originally did not have any cultivation, so he was afraid that the heavenly demon had taken advantage of him in an instant. Just now, the heavenly demon probably wanted to have evil thoughts about him, but just happened to encounter the golden body of the Maitreya Buddha that was enshrined in the little exquisite temple, so it was defeated. Xiaohua had some understanding, but Xiaohua did not know. The Buddhism sect was not like the Taoist sect, and the old monk was not like Daoshan. The Buddhism sect did not need to refine any Buddhism sect's cultivation method. As long as one chanted the Buddhist scriptures every day, even if one did not have the strength to truss a chicken in front of the heavenly demon, they would be comparable to a warrior wearing full armor. It was impossible for them to be used by ordinary heavenly demons. Although the old monk had one foot in the grave, his life of faith was steadfast, waiting for the Buddha Lord to come. To the heavenly demon, he was simply invulnerable. However, why was the heavenly demon able to take advantage of the old monk's weakness at the last moment of his life? This was not something that Xiaohua could understand at this time. And what made Xiaohua even more surprised was that when the old monk fell to the ground, a black shadow with a wisp of arrogant laughter flew out from the old monk's body. Finally, a voice with a hint of unwillingness and anger flew out from the old monk's body. Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva's golden body. There is actually the cause of Namo Maitreya Buddha? This is really beyond my expectations. Damn it, this is all the old bald donkey scheme. Today, I fell into your trap, so consider yourself Buddha is 1 foot higher. Maitreya Buddha, I will return. At that time, I will let you know what it means to be 10 feet higher than the devil. Hiss. Xiaohua's corporeal body naturally didn't see this scene. His golden body, which was already 5 feet tall but was almost completely empty inside, had long seen this scene clearly. The primordial spirit inside the Buddha's relic instantly understood and almost sucked in a breath of cold air. Buddha and devil are indeed everywhere. If there's good, there's evil. If there's light, there's darkness. This heavenly devil is so formless that it actually sneaked into my corporeal body before I achieved enlightenment. It even subtly eroded my physical body under its influence. I understand now. That day in front of Zhai Xinglu, if the original body's temperament was like before, it may not have had a further conflict with Duan Muqiu. In Seven Yang Temple, it may not have been so ruthless to the mortal world's constables. Even in Black Wind Ridge, it may not have killed the Bat King and the Bronze Pillar Country's pursuers. All these subtle changes are all because of this heavenly demon? While the Buddha relic primordial spirit was pondering, the golden body of the Buddha above the exquisite temple shone even brighter, and the chanting became even louder. It was as if a golden sun was reflecting the white sun above their heads. The golden light rushed into the sun, and the remaining crystal threads and thousands of wild gales were attracted by the golden light. They rapidly descended, and together with the golden light, they all fell into the Buddha relic. Jie! The Buddha's Saraira shouted a mantra. A golden Jie word flew out from the Buddha's mouth and rushed into the air. It turned into a tiny golden thread and disappeared. Xiaohua's Buddha's Saraira slightly opened its eyes. It could already see clearly that the golden thread went to the place where the power of faith came from. This Jie word was just like what the old monk said before. It was the Buddha's Saraira borrowing its own power of Buddhism, using the future Buddha Lord's merit to repay the faith of the masses and redeem the Buddha in the sea of suffering. Good, Xiaohua sighed with emotion. The mysteries of Buddhism are indeed extraordinary. I was a bit stingy before. Just as the golden body of the Buddha's light dissipated, an item that looked like a fallen leaf flew out from the Buddha's Saraira and floated in front of Xiaohua's Buddha's Saraira. Good, the Buddha's Saraira raised its hand and that item landed in its hand. It was a golden leaf. Needless to say, it should be one of the last 3 leaves of the exquisite Palette Sutra. Seeing this, Xiaohua was really overjoyed. Ever since he obtained the exquisite Palette Sutra in the Imperial Thunder sect, he had always wanted to make up for the leaves on the exquisite pagoda. Unfortunately, even in the ruins of Buddhism, the Buddha's light of the Maitreya Buddha's golden body could not make up for all the leaves. Since then, Xiaohua had a premonition in his heart that in the Xiaoyu continent where Buddhism was destroyed, he was afraid that it would be impossible for him to make up for the exquisite Palette Sutra. Later on, Xiaohua accidentally arrived at the hidden Immortal continent. Xiaohua's long-cherished wish once again had a chance to be realized. Of course, the hidden Immortal continent was still extremely far away from the Western Paradise. Xiaohua also did not have extravagant hopes that he would be able to obtain these last 3 leaves in a short period of time. Moreover, Xiaohua's cultivation in Buddhism had been steadily increasing. Even in the Buddha's Saraira, there were still mysteries that he himself did not know and could not comprehend. Therefore, he was not particularly anxious. He just wanted to go to the Western Paradise when the miscellaneous matters in the hidden Immortal continent were settled. First, he would deal with the matter of Jianghu's death, and then slowly look for clues about the leaves. Now, through the vein of space, Xiaohua not only came to the Western Paradise, but also encountered the exquisite temple. This exquisite temple was waiting for his arrival. The leaves hidden in the golden body of the future Buddha of the exquisite temple were prepared for him. Wasn't this the legendary, wearing out iron shoes in a fruitless search, only to find it without any effort? At this time, Xiaohua no longer doubted his identity as the future Buddha. The Buddha's Saraira took the golden leaves and looked up at the clear sky outside the main hall. The sky was exceptionally blue. Looking from the main hall of the exquisite temple, it was particularly close. The Buddha's Saraira unconsciously sighed. Amitabha, every drink and every peck is predestined in the previous life. One cause and one effect, waiting for 10,000 years. With the help of the Buddhas, I will bear this kind of karma. I will use my karmic fire to refine the karma of the Buddhas and help the Buddhas achieve fruition. Before he could finish speaking, a myriad of Sanskrit chants resounded once again. The sound of copper bells also resounded, and they were struck a total of 81 times before they stopped. Come out! The Buddha Saraira waved its hand and the Linglong Pagoda flew out from Xiaohua's Naiwan Palace. The golden light flashed and landed on the main hall. That piece of leaf turned into a golden lotus and fell into the pagoda. Kacha! There was a light and crisp sound. It was the Linglong Pagoda fusing into one. Come in! The Buddha's Saraira pointed his finger again, and the exquisite pagoda's Buddha's light shone on one side of the main hall. Chapter 3403. Forget it, this Xiao will take it first. Looking at the old monk lying on the ground with a serene face, Xiaohua couldn't help but feel heartache. This kind of thing had happened several times already, making him feel very uncomfortable. He always felt that in this world, good people rarely have good karma, and evil people live a long life. Army! In a trance, the Buddha's relic chanted the incantation, and the bowl-sized golden character fell on the old monk's body. The golden light dispersed, but the old monk's soul didn't come out. The Buddhist 9 syllables incantation didn't have any effect on the old monk, which made Xiaohua quite surprised. Immediately after, the Buddha's relic chanted the incantation again, and as Xiaohua expected, the old monk's soul still didn't come out. Alas, the old monk bitterly cultivated for a lifetime, but in the end he was still delayed by this king. Xiaohua sighed, feeling that because he became a devil he was implicated, causing the old monk's soul to be unable to escape from the hands of the heavenly devil. It seems that if this old monk wants to reincarnate, this king will really have to use the secret technique of the tantric sect to refine the old monk's relic? But how can I take out the old monk's relic? Moreover, if I want to walk in the Pure Land, it will be troublesome if I don't understand the language here. Let's see what is recorded in the exquisite temple's Buddhist scriptures first. The Buddha's relic waved its hand, and a Buddhist light shot out, and the pagoda in the main hall was also absorbed into the exquisite pagoda. After the exquisite pagoda and the Buddha's relic were absorbed into the exquisite pagoda, Xiaohua looked at the old monk lying on the ground and was very puzzled. The old monk might not be able to live until tomorrow, but after all, there was a big difference between him and his death today. The old monk should have a lot of instructions for Xiaohua. These instructions could only be taught after Xiaohua shaved his head. Now that the old monk was gone, Xiaohua was once again in the dark. However, Xiaohua was already used to this kind of exploration. He very familiarly had the Buddha's relic take out the Buddhist scriptures that had just been absorbed into the exquisite pagoda, and he himself put the old monk's corpse into the small universe bag, and slowly walked out of the main hall. The seal of overturning the sea above the Shaolin Long Temple had already been withdrawn when Xiaohua entered the main hall. Now, the bright and dazzling sunlight shone directly into the small courtyard. The sunlight was extremely bright. Although Xiaohua was not afraid, he still naturally stretched out his hand and cupped it against his eyes. Just now, he had come in a hurry, and left in a hurry as well. He hadn't looked carefully. Now that Xiaohua's gaze swept over the entire courtyard, he sighed even more. This Shaolin Long Temple was even more austere than the Seven-Yang Monastery or even the Jianghu Monastery. It seemed that other than the remnants of a fire in the small hut, there were no other traces of people living here. Xiaohua really didn't know how the old monk managed to survive here. After all, Xiaohua didn't see any traces of Buddhist cultivation techniques on him. The sun was very bright. Standing under the sun, Xiaohua didn't feel particularly hot. However, a very strange feeling came from Xiaohua's skin. It was as if he was being roasted, and also as if the wind was blowing. However, there wasn't any wind at this time. The wind and snow from before had disappeared in an instant. 10,000 years ago, there was a senior from the Buddhist sect who set up this place, and even set up the Shaolin Long Temple here. Could it be that they were waiting for me? Xiaohua naturally wouldn't be as pious as the old monk. His thoughts were very simple. Looking at this simple and crude temple, he frowned and pondered. If that's the case, then this Zhao's life experience is naturally within this senior's calculations? This Xiao has been too busy these past 10 days. I actually forgot. While thinking, Xiaohua's mind immediately entered the space. He took out the map of the hidden Immortal continent that he had obtained from the star-seizing tower. Without saying anything, he threw it to the green-robed Xiaohua. The green-robed Xiaohua continued to nag, but after being smashed by Xiaohua, he immediately shut his mouth. He obediently took out the jade eyes and hastily checked it. Hey, it seems that the temptation is still very useful. Xiaohua's mind withdrew from the space. He looked at the nascent soul sitting cross-legged in his lower dantian. He was very proud. This nascent soul was very popular at this time. Any primordial spirit that wanted to come out and take a look would use this nascent soul. Unfortunately, the nascent soul realm had not yet stabilized and the nascent soul's body had not yet completely solidified. Otherwise, several primordial spirits would have already started fighting. Of course, if the entire nascent soul was completely solidified, it would only become a late nascent soul realm cultivator. However, for Xiaohua's nascent soul with the Tao of the heavens as its foundation and the green-robed Xiaohua's secret technique, several primordial spirits taking turns to control the early nascent soul to come out for a stroll could not be considered a difficult matter, right? Xiaohua's mind withdrew. Immediately, news came from the Buddha's Saraira. Xiaohua slightly closed his eyes. Subsequently, he nodded and released his Buddhist sense. He found what he was looking for about 999 zhang to the west of the Shaolin Long Temple. Xiaohua was about to use the cloud riding technique. However, just as he was about to move, he stopped. He turned his head and looked at the small house where the old monk was eating butter tea. He quickly walked over and took out a large wooden board. He placed it in front of the main hall. Then, he took out the old monk's corpse from his small Qiankuan bag and solemnly placed it on top of the wooden board. Along with Xiaohua's recitation of the rebirth mantra, a strand of Buddhist light once again emerged from the golden Buddha statue and landed on the oil lamp. The worn-out oil lamp flashed with a trace of light, and a bean-sized flame appeared out of thin air from the oil lamp. Amitabha Buddha. Excellent, excellent. Xiaohua's Buddhist sense was constantly released. However, he still couldn't find out how this flame was born. Xiaohua couldn't help but sigh. The Buddhist sect's methods were indeed subtle. Xiaohua held the oil lamp in one hand. The flame of the oil lamp didn't seem inferior in the daytime. Xiaohua's other hand was holding the wooden board. The old monk's corpse was peacefully lying on top of it. When the sun shone on his body, it was somewhat holy. Even his bitter chrysanthemum face reflected an indescribable smile. Xiaohua left the Shaolin Long Temple and walked towards the west side of the temple. The Shaolin Long Temple was located on a huge mountain range. The Shaolin Long Temple was located on the highest peak of the mountain range. Xiaohua descended from the highest point of the Shaolin Long Temple. At this moment, he was walking along the mountain range of the Shaolin Long Temple. The path under Xiaohua's feet couldn't be considered a mountain path. It was just some slightly chiseled stones. Moreover, these stones couldn't be seen clearly under the thick snow. However, the pious Xiaohua stepped on the snow step by step. His feet emitted a zhi sound. This sound seemed to be the only sound between heaven and earth, causing Xiaohua's heart to become increasingly calm. The further he walked, the stronger the wind above the mountain range. However, the flame of the oil lamp didn't seem to be affected at all. It didn't even sway. 999 zhang seemed to be very far, but after walking step by step, there would eventually be an end. At the end of the road was a small groove. Although there was some snow under the mountain wind, the snow had already been blown thin, revealing the dark mountain rocks. If one looked carefully, they would discover that the dark mountain rocks were different from the color of the mountain rocks outside the groove. This darkness was in patches, clusters, and threads. It should have been caused by the fire. Xiaohua's gaze fell on this place. His eyes revealed compassion. He already knew from the Shaolin Long Temple's Buddhist scriptures that this groove was the place where the monks of the Shaolin Long Temple were cremated. In the past 10,000 years, more than 1,000 Buddhist children had returned to the West. The Buddhist fire that burned their remains had burned the mountain rocks at the foot of the mountain into a black color. Xiaohua respectfully walked in front of the groove. He carefully bent down and prepared to place the old monk's remains on top of the groove. At this moment, a rather indifferent Buddhist sense swept over from the distance. It was like a clear wave overflowing from the top of the Shaolin Long Mountain. Oh! This Buddhist sense came abruptly. Xiaohua didn't have time to change his clothes. However, he frowned. As his thoughts flashed, he immediately used the appearance-changing technique. A face with a small nose and small eyes appeared. It was precisely Zhang Xiaohua's appearance. However, in just a moment, Xiaohua's idea changed again. The small nose became tall and straight, and the small eyes became big and spirited. He changed into another appearance. After changing his appearance, Xiaohua wasn't in a hurry. He simply placed the old monk's remains in the groove, put his palms together, and looked into the distance. However, although Xiaohua was standing still, the Buddha's relic in his Naiwen palace was busy. Just now, the Buddha's relic had roughly read through the Buddhist scriptures. Originally, it didn't intend to look at the records of the Pure Land's language. Now that it saw that someone was coming, Xiaohua could only let the Buddha's relic quickly flip through the records. Who would have thought that after the Lingqi sky was broken through, Xiaohua's intelligence had undergone an earth-shattering change. Previously, he had spent a lot of effort to master the language, but in the time it took to eat a meal, he had already made progress. Xiaohua's heart was wild with joy, and at the same time, he became more and more stable. Just when Xiaohua was reciting and familiarizing himself with the language of the Pure Land's world, he heard a very unfamiliar roar of a beast. In the distance, a cyan cloud floated over like a cyan lotus. Above the cloud was a cyan lion several zhang in size. This cyan lion looked a bit strange. From head to tail, it had a pure cyan mane without any impurities. Even under its feet, there were 4 rather large cyan lotuses. That cyan lion looked very fierce. Its eyes, which were bigger than a fist, were flashing with cyan brilliance. Looking at the cyan lion again, a boy wearing a monk's robe was sitting cross-legged. The boy's lips were red and his teeth were white. His face had a kind of otherworldly appearance. The top of his head wasn't bald, but was instead clustered into 5 buns. On each of the buns, there seemed to be a golden token engraved with the golden body of Buddha. The boy wasn't empty-handed. In his left hand, there was a cyan lotus. On the long stem, there was a bowl-sized lotus that was blooming vigorously. The boy's right hand was holding a cyan sword. The sword was plain, and there was nothing special about it. Chapter 3404. The boy didn't come alone. About 10 zhang behind him, there was a strange bird flying. This bird was 3 zhang in size, and its 2 zhang long feathers were black and white. Even the waist and the roots of the wings were black, while the tips of the wings were pure white. What was special was that the bird's neck was very long, at least 5 chi long. This 5 chi long neck didn't have a single feather, and if one looked carefully, a faint bronze color could be seen from the depths of the neck. On the back of the bird stood a woman dressed in palace attire. This woman was in her 20s, and her appearance didn't seem to be particularly outstanding. She had large eyes, slightly coarse eyebrows, and seemed to have gone through a lot of hardships. Although her skin was extremely white, the hand holding the soft sword was very large. Even if there was a golden hairpin inserted into her cloud-like hair, it still wouldn't make people drool. Amitabha Buddha. The boy flew closer and saw Xiaohua waiting there with his palms together. He also chanted the name of Buddha. This poor monk is Ci Hui, how should I address you? This poor monk. Tipu greets Great Master Ci Hui. When Xiaohua heard that it was a monk of the Ci generation, he couldn't help but be secretly surprised. He hurriedly bowed and replied. Monk Ci Hui was surprised and asked curiously, why are you called Tipu? Although you are of the Tantric lineage, shouldn't you also choose a Dharma name within my Buddhist lineage? Great Master? Xiaohua smiled bitterly. This poor monk was previously a Buddhist layman disciple and didn't shave his head and become a monk, so I don't have a real Dharma name. Today was supposed to be a good day for this poor monk to shave his head, but this elder suddenly died, and he didn't have time to give this poor monk a Dharma name. How is that possible? At this time, Ci Hui's Azure Lion had already set foot on the mountain range of the Great Snow Mountain. Ci Hui simply jumped down from the Azure Lion and walked to the front of the old monk's corpse to take a look. He turned his head and asked Xiaohua, since you are going to shave your head, naturally you should prepare a Dharma name before today and fill it in the certificate so that it can be sent to Laiyin Temple to report. How come you don't have a Dharma name when it's time to shave your head? This poor monk doesn't know either. Xiaohua was still smiling. This poor monk did not come from the Great Snow Mountain. Today, I was just passing by the Great Snow Mountain and saw a small temple on the mountain. I wanted to come in and ask for directions, but who would have thought that this elder was already at the end of his life? In order to pass down the mantle of Tantra, this poor monk reluctantly shaved his head. In the end, before the shaving was complete, this elder had already passed away. Therefore, this poor monk still does not have a Dharma name. Immortal friend Ci Hui. At this moment, the woman riding the strange bird walked down from the sky and said with a smile, whether it is the courtesy name of my Confucian cultivator or your Buddhist sect's Dharma name, they are just symbols. Could it be that immortal friend wants to find a suitable Dharma name for immortal friend Tipu? Amitabha, this poor monk is too obsessed. Hearing this, Ci Hui child immediately said with a smile, Ci Hui is Ti Hui, Tipu is also Ti Hui. Many thanks for new Tanyue's reminder. There are very few Tantra disciples in the first place. At that time, the old monk returned to the west. This poor monk was in a hurry and did not pay attention to the range of the psychokinesis. Amitabha, this monk really has a foundation. I don't know which senior brother's reincarnation you are. Ci Hui congratulated, but her eyes looked up and down at Xiaohua and asked again. This poor monk only knows that Tantric Buddhism disciples all wear saffron monk robes. This poor monk does not know why this monk is wearing saffron Taoist robes? How would I know? Xiaohua rolled his eyes and said, this is all this old monk's arrangement. If Grandmaster feels there is a problem, you can ask this old monk. Ask? Ci Hui was very curious about Xiaohua's rolling eyes and this question. It seemed to be different from the monks she usually saw. The woman at the side said in a timely manner, fellow Taoist Ci Hui, if fellow Taoist Tipu said so, I'm afraid you have already lost, right? Fellow Taoist not only wants to go to that place with this little woman, but also wants to invite fellow Taoist Tipu to go with you, right? Hearing this, a trace of a bitter smile appeared on Ci Hui's face. She shook her head slightly and said, Amitabha, this is all because this poor monk's cultivation is not enough. The little bit of desire to win in my heart cannot be erased. Now, I have fallen into New Tan Yu's trap. Fellow Taoist, you can't say that. The woman said with a smile, meeting is fate. If you should not go to that place, I'm afraid you would not have met this little woman today, right? Moreover, if you should not go to that place, why would you make this bet with this little woman in order to leave? I'm afraid this is the only way to put it. Si Hui smiled bitterly again. This poor monk lost my mind. I actually only remembered that condensing the golden body requires psychokinesis, but forgot that the reincarnated senior also has psychokinesis when shave. The woman said with a smile, the conditions this little woman provided are also not bad. Could it be that you did not come for these conditions? Perhaps? Si Hui declined to comment. She turned to Xiaohua and said with a smile, Monk, this poor monk has a good thing here? When Xiaohua heard the two of them talking about that place, he immediately lost interest. He had just formed his nascent soul and his Tao realm was not stable. He did not want to go to any dangerous place. What he wanted to do was to find a place to meditate. Moreover, the space meridian above the snowy mountain was unstable. If it was as Sun Jian said he did not want to pass through the East Sea and South Sea, then he must hurry back to the Xiaoyu continent before the space meridian collapsed. Not going. Xiaohua shook his head like a rattledrum. Without waiting for Si Hui to finish speaking, he immediately shouted, this poor monk still has other things to do. After the old monk's skin is melted and his saraira is taken out, this poor monk will quickly leave this place. Leave this place? The woman's smiling face showed astonishment. Little master is already a monk in this temple. If he does not cultivate here, where else can he go? Xiaohua was speechless. He could not arrogantly say that this temple was built just to wait for him, right? He could not say that this temple had no meaning to exist when he came, right? Lazy little monk. Si Hui smiled. Your tantric sect is not prosperous. Now that you have just entered the tantric sect, your master has already returned to the west. Now you also want to abandon the temple and flee. This really makes this poor monk lament. Can't the cultivation of your previous lives make you wake up? Amitabha Buddha. Xiaohua also smiled. With Buddha in my eyes, which part of the Pure Land is not Buddha? With Buddha in your body, which part of your every action is not cultivation? With Buddha in your heart, which part of the mountain and stone is not a temple? Why did Great Master not painstakingly guard the lamp in the temple, and come to the snowy mountain to be carefree? When Si Hui heard this, her expression slightly changed. She hurriedly raised her hand and said, Amitabha Buddha, this poor monk was wrong. Although little monk has just shaved his head in this life, the root of wisdom of several lives is still there. This poor monk previously wanted to recommend little monk to other temples to cultivate. Now it seems that this was a big mistake. If Great Master is not wrong, then this poor monk is also not right. If there is right and wrong in your heart, how can it still be free of filth? Xiaohua still answered with a smile, not bowing to salute. Si Hui's expression changed even more. He almost did not dare to believe his own ears. He lowered his head to look at the old monk on the wooden board, then raised his head to look at the calm and collected Xiaohua. He took a few steps back, put his palms together and said in a low voice, Amitabha Buddha, this poor monk has really learned something. Seeing this young monk's astonished appearance, Xiaohua was quite proud. He did not feel that he could reach the realm of a senior monk like Si Hui thought, but many times he could see through things with the eyes of a bystander and speak out like this. And it seemed that every time Xiaohua spoke out, he had the posture of shocking the world with a single brilliant feat. This also showed that no matter if it was Buddhism or Taoism, when one cultivated to a high realm, they would achieve the same result through different means. Si Hui lowered her head. Xiaohua was proud. The woman in the palace dress next to him pursed her lips and smiled. She could not help but say, fellow Taoist Si Hui, saying is one thing, doing is another. This snowy mountain is covered with snow all year round. If the sky could be as clear as today, the herdsmen of the snowy mountain would not have to live such bitter and cold lives. These words, you can say it, I can say it, anyone can say it, but who can do it? He wanted to see what this young monk wanted to say. Your Buddhist cultivation technique has made quite a bit of progress. If this poor monk is not wrong, I'm afraid that you have already reached the Rugi realm? Correct. What Grandmaster said is correct. Xiaohua slightly frowned. He didn't want to answer, but after thinking for a moment he still answered honestly. You have studied very few Buddhist scriptures, so much so that this poor monk feels that you may not have even read a single one. Xiaohua's eyebrows twitched. Before today he indeed hadn't read a single Buddhist scripture, but in this short moment, he had already read half of the Buddhist scriptures in his Naiwan palace. Xiaohua looked at the woman who pursed her lips and smiled. He sighed and nodded. What Grandmaster said is correct. This is the third question? Ci Hui turned to look at the woman and said with a wry smile, this poor monk suspects that this little monk is not a Buddhist disciple of the Pure Land world. What? Xiaohua was surprised and even more shocked. At the beginning, he spoke a bit slowly because he had adapted to the Pure Land world's language that was somewhat similar to the Sanskrit language. Now, he was already extremely proficient. He believed that it was impossible for others to see through his origin, but he didn't expect that Ci Hui would still see through him. Therefore, Xiaohua couldn't help but touch his nose and said with a wry smile, Grandmaster, what do you mean? Little monk. The woman smiled as if she was playing a double act with Ci Hui. Fellow Taoist Ci Hui means, you are just a monk who has just shaved his head. Even if you haven't heard of fellow Taoist Ci Hui's Buddhist name before, after all, he is a senior of the Ci generation. Look at your appearance, what Grandmaster? Do Buddhist disciples call their seniors like that? Also, where did you get your Tipfa name? I'm afraid he doesn't have any Buddhist cultivation and is just an ordinary monk. These monks can't condense their karma and merit. Therefore, even if they can use the Buddhist fire to create a saraira, it will be melted bones and other things. Other than being a souvenir and for people to admire, it has no other use. If you want to keep their karma and merit, you can only rely on external forces. And this kind of external force. To be honest, fellow Taoist Ci Hui doesn't have this kind of divine ability. He can only create a saraira. And this saraira isn't that saraira. Xiaohua suddenly understood and said with a bitter smile, this poor monk really doesn't know. The woman glanced at Xiaohua and shook her head slightly. Looks like you really don't know. You only have the cultivation of the Buddhist sect. While speaking, Ci Hui had already formed a seal with both hands. The Buddhist light emitted from his forehead condensed in the Buddhist seal, just like the 9 syllables mantra in Xiaohua's mouth. Go, seeing the golden characters condense in the Buddhist seal, Ci Hui raised his hand and lightly scolded. The golden characters the size of a fist shone brightly and flew out from Ci Hui's hand. The brilliance of the golden characters was extremely bright. Xiaohua unconsciously closed his eyes. And at this very moment, something strange happened. The old monk's body that was originally lying motionless on the wooden board suddenly moved. The old monk's closed eyes also opened. His turbid eyes looked at the sky blankly. But in just a moment, the Buddhist fire and the Buddhist light were reflected in his eyes. The old monk's orange peel-like face unexpectedly showed a rare kind of gratification and relaxation, as if he had put down a heavy burden. His lips trembled slightly. Looking at the shape of his mouth, it should be Southern Gate Maitreya Buddha. However, without waiting for the old monk to open his mouth, the Buddhist seal in Ci Hui's hand had already expanded from the size of a fist to the size of 1 zhang, covering the entire groove at the foot of the mountain. Boom! On the wooden board, the Buddhist fire on the old monk's body flourished and unexpectedly turned into a pair of third-grade lotuses, completely submerging the old monk. The old monk smiled. The turbidity in his eyes unexpectedly disappeared and a kind of clarity flashed. That relaxed smile and the satisfaction of getting what he wanted condensed on his face. Chapter 3406. After the lotus-shaped flame flourished, it turned into 3 balls of flame and gradually disappeared. At the moment when the 3 balls of flame were extinguished, a faint shadow flew out from one of the flames. It was the old monk's soul. The old monk respectfully bowed to Ci Hui and said, Amit Ba, thank you, Venerable One. Immediately, the soul turned into thousands of fireflies and disappeared. Amitabha, seeing this, Xiaohua was delighted in his heart. At the same time, he was also sincerely convinced. Just a moment ago, in front of the main hall of the Shaolin Long Temple, he used the Buddhist sect's 9 syllables mantra, but it didn't have the slightest effect. Here, Ci Hui formed a Buddhist seal and immediately helped the old monk cross over. "Thank you, Great Master Ci Hui." Xiaohua happily bowed and said, "If Great Master didn't help, I'm afraid I would have disappointed the elder. The elder's relics and other things can't be left behind. Take this relic." Looking at the place where the old monk's soul just flew out, a relic smaller than a little finger appeared. Ci Hui said with a bitter face, "He introduced you to Buddhism, so he should be your guide. His karma, if you have magical powers in the future, you should help him eliminate it. Of course, this poor monk can't guarantee whether or not there is any karma in this relic." Yes, this poor monk knows. This female benefactor has already explained it. Xiaohua looked at the relic floating in the air. The color was very turbid, and there were many different colors inside. It wasn't particularly pure. Obviously, the old monk's cultivation realm wasn't very high. Xiaohua waved his hand and was about to take the saraira. However, he had a thought and slowly walked over. He carefully picked it up with his hands and put it into his arms. After doing all this, he turned his head and asked Zihui, "Great Master, this little monk has a question. I don't know if I can ask you?" Hearing Xiaohua call himself little monk, the bitter expression on Ci Hui's face slightly disappeared. She nodded and said, "Monk, if you have something to say, please say it." The old monk has bitterly guarded the Great Snow Mountain, so he must be someone with a tenacious mind. Similarly, I've heard the old monk say that he has studied Buddhism for nearly 100 years. So why is his saraira not as sparkling and translucent as others? Xiaohua naturally didn't hold back and immediately asked. Earlier, Nu Tanyue had already said that the eminent monk who has the secret technique of our Buddhism sect can refine the saraira that he has cultivated all his life before he goes to the West. The process of refining naturally has the effect of eliminating karma. When the karma is gone, the saraira will naturally look very good. Ci Hui explained. This elder does not practice mystic techniques and only studies Buddhist scriptures. He does not have the ability to condense his own negative karma. Therefore, it is not strange that the colors in the relic are mixed. However, for you, this kind of mixed color relic is the best. The old monk is your guide. Helping him get rid of his karma is what you should do. If you help him get rid of his negative karma, your merit will also increase. Even when you condense your golden body, his saraira can also be used. And in those saraira that have already been condensed, the simple negative karma has been eliminated. What is left is the heavy negative karma, which is not easy to remove. Even if you want to use it to condense your golden body, you have to be careful. Speaking of this, Ci Hui was a little radiant. She said again, "As far as little monk knows, your Buddhism sect has already fallen to a lower level. Now in the Pure Land world, the Buddha Lord of my Lei-In temple has passed down the Mahayana Buddhist scripture. Under this Mahayana Buddhist scripture, even an ordinary monk can condense saraira. Little monk understands." Thank you for your guidance. Xiaohua didn't know what Mahayana Buddhist scripture was and what Hinayana Buddhist scripture was. He only slightly lowered his posture, and then slightly muttered to himself as he prepared to say goodbye. But at this moment, there was a faint chanting sound in the distance. Then, a faint golden light flashed from the chanting and flew over the Great Snow Mountain. Buddha's radiance illumination? Ci Hui raised her eyebrows and raised her hand. The green lotus that she had just put away in her left hand suddenly appeared. The green lotus also emitted a deep chanting sound and flashed with a Buddhist light that seemed to be breathing. Like a sword of light, a strand of Buddhist light emerged from the golden light and entered the green lotus. Then, the golden light and the chanting continued to fly forward. Xiaohua withdrew his gaze from the distant golden light and looked at the green lotus. He saw a Buddhist document that had already lost its Buddhist light and was quietly lying there. Ci Hui put away the green lotus, reached out her hand and picked up the Buddhist edict. She opened it and looked at it, then handed it to Xiaohua and said, "Little monk, this Buddhist light shines through your big snow mountain. You are the only disciple of Tantric Buddhism here. You should accept this Buddhist edict." "A Buddhist decree? What do you mean?" Xiaohua stared blankly, somewhat at a loss. Can this little monk not accept it? The Buddha's light illumination is the way the Laiyin Temple sends out the Buddha's decree to all the temples in the Pure Land world. Hui was very patient and explained, wherever the Buddhist light passes, all the temples have to accept the Buddhist edict. You are a Buddhist disciple, naturally you have to accept it. Speaking until here, Hui was somewhat embarrassed. Xiaohua did not know how to accept the Buddhist light. Now, the Buddhist edict should be received by Hui herself. Xiaohua not accepting it was not a big deal. There is no content. Hui pondered a little and said, Buddha Lord has decreed that if possible, every temple in my Pure Land world must send 1 or 2 disciples to Changxing town in hidden Immortal continent. Hang. Without waiting for Xiaohua to speak, that woman was suddenly startled. She narrowed her eyes and looked at Hui. Hui's eyes flashed with a somewhat complicated expression. She looked at that woman and nodded slightly without saying anything. Your Buddha Lord is really good at scheming. That woman snorted coldly. Could it be that he really wants to build a 99 zhang tall golden body of Namo Guanyin Bodhisattva in Changxing town? Ah? Xiaohua raised his eyebrows. His heart was overwhelmed with shock. This. Hui shook her head. This poor monk does not know the Buddha Lord's plan. This poor monk is only a Buddhist disciple. If he does this... That woman opened her mouth, seemingly having a lot of complaints. However, when they reached her mouth, they turned into helplessness, leaving behind only a trace of hidden bitterness. I'm afraid it will cause a huge wave. Little monk, quickly accept this Buddhist edict. This poor monk still has something to say to you. Hui did not dare to talk too much with that woman. She turned her head and passed the Buddhist edict to Xiaohua again. Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand. Master, this little monk does not have the ability to accept this Buddhist edict. This is your divine ability. You should keep it for yourself. This little monk will go back and recite scriptures in front of the Buddha. That woman could not help but laugh. She looked at Hui and said, Fellow Taoist Hui, you really made an unnecessary move. Forget it. Hui looked at Xiaohua's shrinking appearance. Obviously, he was not prepared to accept the Buddhist edict. She smiled bitterly and said, Since you are not willing to accept it, this poor monk can only leave this Buddhist edict behind. Of course, you are the only monk in this snowy mountains temple. Moreover, you have just shaved your head. According to the Buddhist edict, you do not need to go to the longevity town. It is good that Master knows, Xiaohua said with a smile. However, at this point, Hui changed the topic and said, However, this poor monk still has something to discuss with you. If Master wants to go to that place, then it is better not to mention it. Xiaohua hurriedly waved his hand, not giving Hui the opportunity to speak. However, Xiaohua still underestimated Hui's persistence. Hui did not even look at Xiaohua's waving hand and said, You have the root of wisdom. Moreover, when you shaved your head, there was a Buddhist vision. In the future, you will definitely be a pillar of my Buddhist sect. If you had a monk by your side to guide your cultivation, this poor monk would not say anything. After all, Tantric Buddhism is different from the other 12 sections. However, in the current situation, although you have entered my Buddhist sect, there is no one to guide you in cultivation. You are still in the same situation as before. You only have Buddhist divine abilities but not the protection of my Buddhist sect's Dharma. You should know that Buddha is 1 foot tall and the devil is 10 feet tall. Your cultivation is very easy to go astray. It is like a child with great strength holding a great killing weapon. If you are not careful, you will hurt others and also hurt yourself. This poor monk has also suffered a great loss before. Therefore, this poor monk does not dare to say that he is your senior. This poor monk only wants to ask you to follow this poor monk. This poor monk will tell you what he has learned. C.I. Hui's face was still somewhat bitter. Seeing this, Xiao Hua's heart warmed. In fact, Xiao Hua thought that if he did not accept the Buddhist edict just now, C.I. Hui could use it to threaten him. C.I. Hui could even use the name of a senior to ask him to follow. Of course, just now, C.I. Hui could also use the opportunity of refining the old monk Saraira to raise conditions for Xiao Hua. However, C.I. Hui simply ignored these opportunities. She only used a pleading tone to speak to Xiao Hua. She spoke very sincerely, as if she was an old friend who had known Xiao Hua for a long time and wanted to ask Xiao Hua for help. Xiao Hua had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. Now that he heard it, he could not help but secretly ponder. In fact, what Xiao Hua was worried about now was that he did not want C.I. Hui and that woman to know his Dao sect cultivation. He did not want them to know his identity as Dao sect's Xiao Hua. As for what the two of them were planning, Xiao Hua was not afraid. Even if the two of them were nascent soul cultivators, Xiao Hua's Dao sect cultivation had completely recovered and he had even advanced to nascent soul. Even if he could not beat them, escaping would not be a problem. Speaking of Yuanying realm being unstable, this was indeed Xiao Hua's misgivings. However, Xiao Hua's situation was different from others. Others only had one primordial spirit. If they wanted to stabilize their realm, they could only meditate. However, Xiao Hua had many primordial spirits. Any one of them could replace Xiao Hua in meditating. Even if the green-robed Xiao Hua entered the Yuanying realm, the effect would be better than Xiao Hua's. Furthermore, stabilizing one's realm was a gradual process. Xiao Hua had just advanced to nascent soul a few days ago, and there was no situation where his Dao foundation was unstable. He did not necessarily have to cultivate in seclusion. Traveling to the Pure Land was not necessarily a bad thing, at least he could see what the so-called Pure Land was like. The only thing that Xiao Hua was afraid of was time. He had to pass through as much as possible before the space meridian collapsed, and return to the hidden Immortal continent as soon as possible. After all, the matter of Jianghu country's recovery had just begun, and there would definitely be many places where he would need to appear. After thinking for a while, Xiao Hua raised his head and said, "This little monk thanks Master for his kind intentions. This little monk wants to ask, where are you going? What do you need this little monk to do? How long will it take?" You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.